Honeywell-related executive session.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. Okay, the agenda is approved 7-0. Thank you. I'm sorry? Can they not
Are
hear?
you all having a public hearing?
Okay. I turned the air conditioner off.
Okay, great, thanks. All right, we'll go to Sergeant Chris for sheriff report.
All right, good evening.
Because I can turn that one thing up a little bit.
Just a few things real quick to note. The holiday weekend went really well with traffic in parks. No issues there. I had the opportunity to really drive through town over the past week, and the striping looks great. I really applaud the town for getting that done. It makes things look a lot nicer and really amplifies where to stop, when to stop, and we'll just work on how to stop, you know. School's in full session. I think I talked a meeting or two ago about the traffic enforcement deal that the county was working on, and Lyons is included in the stats, but I don't have the stats broken out, particularly for Lyons. But during the first 2 weeks of school, with the saturation of school zone patrols in the county, which included the Niwot schools and obviously the Lyons Elementary and High School, 51 total hours were committed, 47 stops were done, 18 tickets were given, and 29 warnings. And the tickets vary from disregarding a stop sign to speeding. So what we did notice, though, in town, in Lyons particular, that our biggest problem really is the stop sign violations there at 2nd and McConnell. The speed and the congestion just keeps it down to a minimum. I think the top speed we got was like 6 miles an hour over the 20. So we made a pretty good impact, and hopefully that sets off the tone for the year. But we'll still continue those school zone patrols. I have stuff to say about the noise ordinance and stuff, but I know that'll be for later on, so that's all I have for now.
Okay, any questions for Sergeant Christ? All right, we'll come back to you later when we
sure
get to
you will.
noise. All right, we'll go over to staff reports.
I'm just following up on the finance report from last board meeting. I understand that there were some questions and concerns and maybe some language that wasn't well understood. So I'm just here to kind of answer everybody's questions and see if we can't resolve any issues.
I read your memo, and I think that the difference is just more, I think, how we're talking about things. Whereas I think we've tended to in the past separate operations budget from capital budgets. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like you're looking at it a little bit more holistically overall, where we're kind of looking at, okay, operationally, this is what we're planning on, and then we're going to approve these capital expenses. So I don't have any further questions. I thought your memo was clear. I don't know if the rest of the board has any questions or follow-up items on that.
Okay,
I think we're
fantastic.
good. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Administrator, flood report.
Okay, flood recovery update. Public Works buildings, both of them were just finalizing final touches for the buildings and the property. We are hoping to have water to the site maybe by the end of September, and that will allow us to get a TCO, temporary certificate of occupancy, and we'll be able to move our materials in there, but we can't put equipment or put people in there until we get the sewer hooked up, which we're hoping that will be November, December, and then we'll be able to occupy those buildings fully. 2nd Avenue Bridge is still in review by FEMA. They did say that they didn't think anybody could take a look at it until after September 11th. And right now we're still on schedule, but seeing these hurricanes come in does cause some concern. So I don't know. They're very short-staffed as it is, but I'll keep checking in with them periodically. Bowen Park Phase 2, as you may have noticed the smell around town. We've put in some amended topsoil to begin some seeding and doing some sodding in that area. And then we'll start moving forward with the custom pavilion and the pump house, which is for our irrigation system. Lyons Valley River Park, I met with the biologist from Sierra Ponds a week ago, and he took some samples of the pond, and his initial thoughts was that the pond was very healthy. He said the water's very clear, there's some fish in there, the algae was not a huge concern for him, but he's going to run some additional testing on some water samples that he took, and we'll come back with some recommendations hopefully this week. So, Apple Valley water line is moving along well. We have the entire water line is in. We just need to bore under Highway 36 and connect to the existing water line on Planet Bluegrass properties. And then we'll do service connections to 3 properties, and that project should be wrapping up hopefully in October. Nothing really new with the wastewater treatment plant, just still waiting for our permit so that we can hook up the new outfall line. Eastern Corridor Utilities, we are putting in the pressure reducing valve this month, which it will allow us to do the water connection to the Public Works buildings. And then we're still waiting for our permit to do boring under the road, under the 2 highways, Highway 36 and 66. And that's kind of basically where we're at with that project. The pedestrian bridge at 3rd and Park, we started taking a look at some initial design and costs for this, and it's coming in double of what we thought it would come in at. So we're reevaluating this bridge location, but we still need to get more information before we make a decision on what to do with this bridge. And also with 4th and Evans, we're just ensuring, reviewing our scope of work and our cost estimate for that project, that bridge as well. And we will be doing on 4th and Evans, there's a curve area that needs to be repaved. It has a guardrail rail and a retaining wall associated with it. That has to be completed by the end of the year. So we're working on design and doing some environmental checking in that area. But that will be completed by the end of the year. And then CDBG, we have more paving repair money through CDBG that we've started design with. So this will allow paving and curb and gutter to be placed in 9 sites around town. And we will be meeting with affected neighborhoods once we have a 30% design in place and discussing how it might change some access to parking and such. And then Lions Valley River Park bank stabilization, we've put that out for an RFQ for design, and that project will start construction this winter and complete by spring. And I think that's about it for flood recovery.
Any questions for staff? Trustee Farrell?
Yes, I have a question. I was curious about, let me go back to my note. Lions Valley River Park and working on replacing the kayak masts. Do you have a time frame update on when that is? I've had somebody inquire from me.
I just know that they've ordered the masts, but
Okay.
I don't know when they're going to be in. I can check on that on we have a weekly Wednesday meeting, construction meeting, but they had to reorder the poles that they had before, and they're also going to powder coat them, so they blend a little more with the environment and don't stick out so much.
If you wouldn't mind just shooting me an email and then I
Sure.
can respond to.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Trustee Browning?
This may more relate to something on the consent agenda, but since you mentioned Bone Park Phase 2 and the pump house, there was a reference in the Walsh construction contract to the pump house placement being reviewed to draw water from the river for irrigation.
Yes.
Do we confirm a water right to do that? Or is
Yes,
that-
we did.
Oh. And we have the right to pull water from the river from
We're
irrigation?
making an arrangement with Longmont to defer their water from further below the river, as we talked about when we had the water workshop. We've worked that out with them to be able to take it out at that location.
So by the time the ball fields construction is done, we should have access to river water to irrigate them? That's good news, thank you.
Yep.
Just a question on the Third Avenue Bridge. So what happens with that money or kind of getting close to our deadline for funding on this?
It just stays in the pilot program and just is absorbed into the other projects that we have in the pilot. You can't move that money out anywhere else, and the insurance money as well has to stay with the pilot.
What are some potential uses?
Probably Bone Park, because Bone Park, we're running up against quite a few change orders on that project, and we're maybe 50% complete, and I anticipate we may have more expenses come up, so we'll probably apply that funding to Bone Park.
So it sounds like the decision is somewhat made.
Not completely. I mean, we need a pedestrian bridge no matter what, so we need to make it the best option that we have to make a bridge happen.
The latest river modeling is showing that that bridge almost has to be 180 feet long to cross. And so the cost of that has gone up to $600,000.
618,000.
And it just may not be feasible. We may have to go back to our other option, and we'll bring that to the board for your decision. But
Yeah.
we talked once about just stepping stones during low season. But if there is, if there's an overage with the skate park or with ball field issues or anything, we can use it in that project.
Yeah, just my concern is we're going to run into the same problem, and there's going to be issues with Fourth and Evans as well. And,
Yes.
we know what those issues are.
Yes.
My concern is if we don't use this money for a bridge, we're not going to get a bridge, potentially. At least not one that's ADA and
Well,
gets
Fourth
people
and-
off the highway.
Fourth, we can't use any of it toward Fourth, correct?
No.
Because it wasn't part of the
Right.
original scope. But we are, the modeling that is being done at Third, or that was done at Third and now being looked at a little closer at Fourth will determine the price of that bridge. We've contacted Safe Routes to School to say we need to do a little more modeling to confirm length at that location. But it is a different scenario in that the north side is out of the floodplain at Fourth and Evans, where at Third, both sides are in the floodway. So there's a little difference there. So we're working on it.
Yeah.
And we'll keep you in touch.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Thanks, Trace. In regard to the administrator's report, while we're on the topic of floodplains and floodways, I do want to make the board aware of and the public aware of an updated map revision that will be coming to Boulder County shortly. You may have heard about the CHAMP project, which is the Colorado Hazard Area Map Project. This is the mapping that's been being conducted by the state since the 2013 flood, implementing all that new data into a new flood insurance map. And they have been going around the state doing mandatory public hearings on the proposed new flood maps. And Boulder County will be the last because we have the most substantial changes to that flood insurance map. And the preliminary maps that I am seeing are going to have a very significant impact on a couple blocks in town, putting people that have traditionally been in the floodplain into the floodway. And so I would like to start meeting with different neighborhoods and sharing the proposed maps. So when it does go to public hearing, people are aware, that they need to attend and they can ask those questions. I've also reached out to some of the realtors in town, and I would like to meet with them and do some basic education so that they understand the restrictions that are going to be placed on those houses if this new flood map is adopted. The third consideration is that once we are done with all of our flood projects as a town, we will then file what's called the letter of map revision, and then that floodway will change again and hopefully decrease the residences from the floodway, because we will have created a better floodway through Second Avenue and McConnell in some of those areas. So this is not just a black and white, this is what it is today and what's going to be tomorrow. This is a changing and evolving map. And the letter of map revision, I'm being told, could take 18 months to adopt once we're done with our plans. So in the meantime, people will be in a floodway that have not been before. And that's going to have significant impact on the ability to do any construction, the ability to resell your home, your flood insurance rates. So I want to give everyone a heads up, and we'll be meeting with small groups of people in hopes of answering their questions better. We have started our annual jetting and videoing of our sewer system. We have found 4 areas so far that are in need of attention, of having the sewer line dug up and replaced. And so that is something, again, in our sanitation fund. We always budget a little bit for that. But this year it appears there's going to be 4 major projects we're going to need to take care of. So if you're seeing crews out and about, that's what they're doing. And tomorrow, Jill and I are meeting regarding the budget and see what we can take care of yet this year in hopes of not having to put that in our 2020 budget. Mr. Tamburello with the Greens Project, I want to let you know that they have requested a 2-week extension on their closing date, mostly because we've been working through the title exceptions that were listed on the property, and we've been really successful to date getting those cleaned up. And he is planning a vacation, and so we are moving the closing to October 25th on that property, and want to make you aware of that. And also want to let folks know that KUNC and the Associated Press actually have picked up and are going to be running stories on the loss of mobile home parks around our state and around the country, and the impact that is having on the housing markets around the country. So they did come and interview some residents that were displaced after our flood, and staff to talk about options for folks that used to reside in mobile home parks. Other than that, the community, some of the community programs going on right now, if you've seen the fort out at Bone Park, that is sponsored by Great Outdoors Colorado, and it's a initiative to get kids outside to play instead of in front of their screens, and that's a moving display that's going all around the state, but it's really an awesome piece of art as well as a play venue for kids. So that will be here through mid-September, so probably just a couple more weeks. And other than that, I think the rest of it speaks for itself within my report. I guess there is one exciting piece of news. Venus de Miles is looking for a new home base, and they're interested in renting Bone Park next year potentially, and pretty much running a canned operation, one of those that they supply all the staff, all of the infrastructure, and we receive a special event permit for leasing them our park. So we're going to be continued discussions with them, but they're really excited to maybe consider Lions as their home base for that bike ride. So that's kind of exciting. Staff will continue working on that. Any other questions about my report I didn't cover?
Just a question on the flood ordinance that we have said we'd like to revise. Any progress on that?
I think we have our new engineers now, and one of them is becoming a certified floodplain manager and should have that here in the next month or two. With that being fresh in his mind and with these new CHAMP maps, I think that would be a good time to try to maybe get that in front of you before the end of the year. But I would think it might be closer to November or December.
Okay, great, thanks. Trustee Roberts.
Administrator Simonson, you've mentioned a few times in my memory dangers that various situations have arisen that might threaten our ability to carry flood insurance for the town. And I don't know if that is an issue that's related to this new mapping and your efforts to educate the public in the new floodplain areas, but would you suppose that it would be helpful for us to have some education that's town-wide to generally understand the challenges and the threats to
Sure.
our sustainability with respect to flood and our flood insurance and what the consequences are.
Sure. I think, again, this is really good timing. If we would do some specific neighborhood educations, so individuals who are most impacted really have some quality time to ask questions individually. We could certainly host a community-wide education event and invite the Colorado Water Conservation Board here, the folks that monitor us to be in compliance with the National Flood Insurance Program. And that would be right in line again with that flood ordinance. So I want to take a look at doing that this
I would really
later
appreciate
fall,
that. I
early
think we could
winter.
all probably stand to refamiliarize ourselves, if not for the first time.
Because one of the
these
requirements
issues.
of that program is to keep our flood ordinance updated as well. So that would be good timing to kind of maybe wrap all that up this late fall.
Thank you.
Thanks for suggesting that.
All right, any other questions? Trustee Browning?
Yes. I didn't hear anything about the centrifuge replacement lately. Is that still continuing? Where is that?
The engineers are trying to put together specifications of what is the best size of a centrifuge compared to what was initially installed, and feel that it needs to be significantly of higher power than what was installed. If we do that, however, it may not work in the existing building, so that will create more issues. So they are working on trying to come up with some specs of a centrifuge that could potentially still fit within the footprint of the existing facilities and meet our needs. So in the meantime, we are still wet hauling, and it is very expensive. But they know that it is a priority to us to try to come up with a resolution, because once we come up with the specifications, our procurement requires us to advertise that for a few weeks and then selection. So this is going to continue probably through September and potentially October.
And one more question. Did we get the post-festival financial reports from Planet Bluegrass yet?
For Folksfest? No. Not
Okay.
yet. What's the date?
They're due 1 week after the festival, I know, but haven't been received yet. Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll go on and move on to the next item. Next up is audience business. This is where the audience is welcome to address the board on topics that are not on tonight's agenda as a public hearing. We do have a public hearing for Ordinance 1066, which is amending Chapter 16, Article 3 of the Lyons Municipal Code to add artisan manufacturing as a permitted and conditional use in the commercial downtown zone. So if you're here for that item, please save your comments for the public hearing. Otherwise, you're welcome to address the board now on other topics. Does the clerk have a sign-up sheet?
Farrah Abram is first. I'm sorry, I am the worst at names.
Did you say for the noise ordinance, hold out till the...
No, your noise is fine now, thanks.
Thank you, I appreciate it. My name is Fareed Abraham, 142 Kelly Drive. This is in regards to the Lions Den. I have emailed the latest decibel readings to the BOT. Hope you've all received it. If not, please contact me. I also appreciate what the sheriff is doing and how they've treated us. They've been very kind. All the deputies are receptive and understanding. I want to thank you. I do want to point out some inaccuracies in the sergeant's letter to the BOT that was on the website. In regards to 10 calls over a 3-month period, that's inaccurate, because I know our household is probably called 10 times in August alone, including 3 times we did not get a call back after requesting one. 2 times the response took over an hour due to the deputy being in Boulder responding to another call, which is understandable because it definitely was more critical than a sound complaint. I know 4 different households calling, not 2 as in the letter stated, including, I do believe it was Tuesday the 13th. I know of 3 separate households calling that night in particular because it was a Tuesday night and extremely loud. Also, it said most of the calls were after 10 p.m., and I'd say 75% of my calls have been before 10 p.m. The ones that are after 10 p.m., there is recorded music, in other words, versus live music, and very loud talking, clanking of bottles, laughing. Like to add a couple little pieces of information. The top 5 environmental concerns for our planet are biodiversity, deforestation, pollution, climate change, and water. I had to read my own writing, which is not too good. And for the pollution, the 7 key types of pollution are air, water, soil, noise, radioactive, light, and thermal. And I'm saying let's stop the noise pollution that is affecting our planet and our community. It's just another thing that's adding on what will be the straw that breaks the camel's back, whether it's the communities or the individuals. Selfishly, I will say that. I feel like my summer has been stolen from me due to the repeated oral assault from the Lion's Den. My quality of life has been seriously compromised, and my mental stress continues to be elevated. I look forward to working further with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Who's next?
Thomas Casey.
Are you doing time? 'Cause I don't have okay.
Good evening. Thanks for a couple of moments of your time. My name's Thomas Casey. I attended the last meeting several weeks ago.
Could you give your address too? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry,
Thank you.
Seward Street.
Thanks.
After hearing some experiences of the folks last meeting about the noise, I was wondering how I could find out myself about how loud it really was. This past weekend, I got an opportunity to conduct a completely non-scientific experiment. My son and daughter from Littleton were going up to ask us for a meeting, so my wife and I, of course, said we'd take care of our grandchildren, aged 2 and 3. We decided to take them out on Friday night, went to the Lion's Den to eat some good food, and listen to music. The girls had very little experience listening to live music, so we thought we'd take them and see what they thought. Walked in, went out to the patio and sat down. And immediately, we arrived like 6:15 or so. I think the music began at 6 o'clock. A gentleman was performing an acoustic group of music, songs primarily like coffee house music, James Taylor, Gordon Lightfoot, other kind of low-energy music. It was nice and enjoyable. The girls made a beeline to a spot right in front of the stage, 10 or 15 feet back, and began waving to the gentleman who was playing the music. He was nice enough to stop, miss a couple of notes, and wave back. And the girls were thrilled about that, of course. I was looking from our table in the middle. I was looking at these 2 little girls, back to their backs, standing up to the stage, holding hands and dancing. And it was a special moment. About 4 or 5 other children came out on the dance floor. They all started holding hands and running around, dancing, listening to the music. Big smiles were on everybody's faces, and that was both the children and the crowd. Our night drew to a close about 7:30. We headed back to the house, got them in the tub, had ice cream, and got them in bed. As bedtime approached, I heard one of them say, "Pappy, that was my best night," which I loved. The sweeties kept sleeping through the night without a peep. They weren't waking up screaming or anything. And frankly, I felt their quality of life was enhanced rather than damaged, as we've heard before. Thanks again for your time.
Thank you.
Matt Rooney.
Hello, Matt Rooney, 4196 Ute Highway is our business. I don't live in town anymore, sadly.
You do have to give your home address, though.
Home address 1636 Apple Valley Road. I'm here tonight. I think all of you are aware of the CDOT proposals for safety between Route 36 and 66 intersection up through town, what we call our Eastern Corridor. I attended their first meeting in Longmont and spoke at length with them. Very helpful. What I was told is that their top consideration is a median going down the road. As a business owner and the other business owners along that stretch, that will have a massive impact on our businesses. Currently, we are about 74% of our business is eastern going western, and if there's a median, that could be cut in half or more if it's just difficult for them to turn in. I am certain all of the businesses along there have strong safety concerns, and we want to find a fix for that problem, but that median is not really the best for the businesses. I just heard tonight from Victoria, thank you, that you guys have contacted CDOT about having a meeting here locally so we could all learn more. They seemed vague at the time of that meeting about a final plan, timelines and whatnot, so we'd love to hear more about that and find a solution that works for the businesses in town. Thank you.
Thanks. That's all that signed up. Okay, if you haven't signed up and want to speak, we'll come on up. Bonita, you're fine. You can go next, and then we'll let anybody else come up that wants to speak yet. Thanks.
My name is Benita Yoder, 401 2nd Avenue. I'm here at the behest of Laverne Johnson, who wants to make sure you all know, all of you on the board and everyone here and everyone listening, that you are invited to her free history talk this Thursday, September 5th, How We Saved Our High School. It's at the Redstone Museum from 6:30 to 7:30. And without that campaign, kids could be being bused to Longmont. She's at home tonight working on her talk and listening to you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Next. Come on up.
Hello, Wayne Anderson, 227 County Road 69, 450 Main Street, 4196 Ute Highway. I just want to echo what Matt said, which is basically to kind of put on your radar. It's kind of a big deal what they're proposing in terms of their ideas to get traffic through town as fast as possible. And the marketing approach for Lions, since I've lived here, since 1996, has always been, how do we get these people to slow down and stop? So it's really weird being on Main Street where we're at, going through, it's like one-way traffic. So you got all this traffic coming and going, but we only get one shot at them just because it's a one-way road. It's weird. So we always talk about it, business owners. Yeah, it's crazy. But what do you do, right? How do you fix that? I have no idea. But thinking about that, and like La Mariposa, I don't know if you guys have ever tried to go eat there from town, but it's almost impossible to turn left in there. It's such a pain, and I apologize to them every time I go in there. I feel so bad for you guys. They go, yeah, we talk to the town, but we don't ever hear anything. But what they're proposing would kind of do that for that entire eastern stretch, basically make it impossible to turn left in or to turn left out to get out of there. The only way that we can, there's so much traffic. That's a very dangerous curve. You guys realize that. It's been forever. It's ever since I've been here. It's like there's constant wrecks. And we've been very fortunate at the distillery. We're serving alcohol. It's like we're really nervous. We don't want anybody to get in an accident, coming or going, obviously. And we haven't, knock on wood so far, but constantly in and out of the Circle K there, it's a freaking, you're taking your life in your hands going, and people are flying. So restricting that ability to turn in and out is really makes it difficult for the business. But from a safety standpoint, just slow everything down. If we could recommend to CDOT just to slow everything down and not try to make it this funnel through town as fast as you can, that serves every goal that I've ever heard, this board, past boards, talk about. So anyway, it's kind of down the road, it's a thing, but just please be aware that it's a big deal coming down the pike, and please don't just let them shove it down our throat. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for audience business? Go ahead. Okay, sure. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Tia Welch, and I am at 4170 Ute Highway, which is currently the vacant lot. Hopefully, we're going to have a future building on it, and it will be a retail space. And I just got through the site development phase of planning, and I know we're thinking about putting in future connections to trails and also sidewalks. So to slow down that street rather than put a median might be beneficial for that future connection for trails as well, since we're planning on it. And then I just want to echo everything else that Matt had said as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. I wasn't going to say anything. Julie Brothers, 142 Kelling Drive. Just real quick, I also really am all about slowing down Highway 66. So I just wanted to mention to the gentleman from Seward that he didn't happen to catch an acoustic set, so that really would have probably added to his really good experience. Just wanted to outline that because the difference between an acoustic set and a set with drums and amplified bass and all that is much different. So I just wanted to mention that. And also, I think you all got your graphs there. I don't know if you saw that, but the main thing I wanted to point out is we did 4 different rounds of monitoring of noise. And since I do work in data science, I thought it would be interesting to just look at differences over time. And there aren't any. So I just wanted to let you all know that. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Others for audience business? Anyone else? Okay. Thank you. And for those of you who did speak about noise, there's an agenda item on our agenda tonight, later on for discussion by the board. Okay. Next up is ordinances and public hearings. I do have a board appointment, but since it's not on the agenda, I'll just do it during trustee reports. Okay. I'll let the clerk introduce the ordinance, please.
There'll be a public hearing tonight for ordinance 1066, an ordinance of the Town of Lyons, Colorado, amending Chapter 16, Article 3 of the Lyons Municipal Code to add artisan manufacturing as a permitted and conditional use in the commercial downtown zone district.
All right, is there a staff report?
Yes. PCDC recommended this ordinance as an attempt to allow for a greater breadth of uses in the commercial downtown with regard to small-scale, clean manufacturing. They thought that allowing artisan manufacturing, which was not what is considered your typical old-scale manufacturing, would increase tenancy and potentially property tax in the downtown. They have been considering this as an option since 2014 and have wrestled over issues such as how do you define the size of artisan. How do you make sure that you're still attracting people to the downtown? They addressed both of those issues by including in the definition that there would be some sort of public-facing side to the artisan manufacturing, whether that's retail or leasing or teaching, that the public would be allowed in and could participate in some way in that portion of that manufacturing, either by buying something there or by leasing or by for example, those things. There was concern about limiting the number of people with regard to the size of the manufacturing and the square footage. So they looked at, in particular, just allowing this as a permitted use in already existing buildings, and if somebody wanted to come in and allow or encourage an expansion of the building, that would be done through a conditional use process, which would require more extensive review. It would have to go through the PCDC and the Board of Trustees. So the ordinance fits the criteria of the code. It accommodates a new innovation in land use that was not kind of considered at the time of the code. The ordinance has also been noticed properly. So staff is looking for feedback and recommends adoption of the artesian zoning. Thank you.
Okay, are there questions from the board before we open the public hearing? I just had a question. In the last, so it's in the first section where it kind of is the definition, but in the third paragraph and at the very end, loading docks, service stores should not face residential uses. Can you just clarify that?
I think it should be loading docks and service stores should not face residential uses. So there shouldn't be a loading dock facing a residential use.
So where are the residential uses? Are those part of the, or is it, are you talking about adjacent?
Adjacent residential uses, like residential neighborhoods across the street.
So if your business is on High Street and your back of your business points toward the residential, you want the deliveries to come in through the front door, essentially.
Or the side.
Yeah, I just think if there are no setbacks and there are no sides to some, like around Main Street, some businesses don't have any doors except the front door. So
on High Street, yeah, it would be around the back.
okay. I'm just trying to think of I'm trying to picture all the businesses there to see if that will create an issue for some of them. Well, I mean, even on Main Street, you have some have residences like behind the businesses, and so.
I mean, one way to fix this is, it already says should, so it's not shall, but we could make it even more clear that, loading docks and service stores should not face residential uses unless otherwise permitted by the director, to give some discretion into it if there's no other reasonable alternative.
Now, what's the concern, I guess, with it facing the residential?
Noise impact. When you have a residential use, you don't want loading docks necessarily across the street.
Okay. I was just curious okay. Other questions? Okay, not seeing any other questions, we'll go ahead and open the public hearing. If you would like to speak to ordinance 1066, you may come forward at this time. Would anyone like to speak to this ordinance? Not seeing any takers, we'll close the public hearing. Is there a motion, please, so that we can open up discussion?
I'll move for approval of ordinance number 1066.
Is there a second? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Would anyone like to open up discussion or offer any amendments? So I actually tried to kind of come up with a clean amendment for some of the language issues that I'm struggling a little bit with. And it was more than what I could kind of get to work into an amendment process, but I'll just try to give you the sense of what I'm kind of looking at. It's just trying to do some wordsmithing to make it a little bit more objective and maybe try to capture what I think our intent is, because I heard in the workshop there's support for this, and I think that it is a good thing generally, that we should try to clarify what's allowed and what's not allowed. And personally, I kind of feel like our zoning code doesn't work very well for our community, just because it's really designed to put uses in different areas, and I actually feel like sometimes I'm more interested in things that are compatible from a look and feel, but if the use is not interfering with anybody else, it should be probably considered. But like the first sentence, something that maybe breaking this up into a couple sentences might help make it a little bit easier for staff and for potential businesses to know if they would qualify. So saying artisan manufacturing refers to small-scale production of custom handmade, and in parentheses, non-automated, using non-automated procedures of products for direct sales, and is limited to on-site production of hand-fabricated manufactured items or something like that. So just trying to work in the whole concept that we're really talking about. You're making custom things by hand, and it's not, becoming a production facility. Because I do worry a little bit about where the lines would be on this, and it would really be pretty much up to staff to review every one of these and give an opinion. So that's just my general concern, is maybe playing with the language a little bit more and giving staff direction to try to maybe take some input and come back with some revisions. I mean, there's also a lot of just missing words, like there's no noun right now in the first sentence, so it doesn't, there's nothing after hand manufactured to kind of indicate what we're referring to. So it seems like we need manufactured goods through the use of hand tools. I just don't want to, I think it needs some cleanup before we pass it. That's just my 2 cents. Trustee Browning.
Kind of following up on some of the discussions we had in the workshop, I think this is a good proposal. There's a lot of empty space downtown. I'd rather have an artisan manufacturing operation there than empty space. I think the nature of artisan manufacturing will bring people into downtown. If some of the artisan shops are able to sell some of their goods, great, more sales tax. The subjectivity of individual businesses doesn't bother me. I don't think government generally, or the town of Lyons in particular, is very good about in advance figuring out what types of desirable businesses in this general category we want to see and don't want to see. I'd rather let the market dictate that. And subjectivity in zoning codes and regulations that go through conditional use process doesn't bother me. If that's a big problem, then the design guidelines and everything that have been passed for the Eastern Corridor and that the PCDC is working on for downtown, they're extremely subjective in terms of what types of materials are desirable or not, what type of landscaping is desirable or not. So that aspect of this doesn't bother me, and I appreciate the PCDC's effort that went into this and staff's effort, and I support it.
Any other comments? Trustee Roberts?
Thank you. I largely agree with Trustee Browning and Mayor Sullivan. I don't disagree or don't oppose refining these documents as you suggest, but I would suggest we don't want to write out something called automated. Automation is inherent in some of the smallest and most tedious and time-consuming crafts, and we think of like 3D printers or a CNC milling machine, and anything where someone designs something on a computer that turns into an object you hold in your hand is very likely, particularly going forward, but today it's very common that we would need to use some other word like, I don't know, mass production, or, but would avoid automation.
Good. So maybe we could take a stab at amending this just to kind of do some of the, or I don't know if staff can just kind of look through the wording and say, can you clean it up and make it so it's a little clearer what we I mean, fixing the missing words and stuff like that.
We can, the
don't need
and
to
that's
do
missing
that up
between the
here.
doors, we can fix that, and then the missing noun should be goods in there. That's certainly within the power of the ordinance to fix the, kind of the errata items.
Okay. I would like to offer an amendment, though, for the second section in the definition where it says an allowance for public viewing or customer service space is required. I'm a little bit concerned that some of the existing ones may not have that or meet that requirement. And I don't know what it means. A public viewing means it must have a window? Or do they have to come inside and be able to watch the manufacturing process? Or is it
It could be
service to
order something.
some kind of counter?
Yeah, something that encourages people to come in and engage there.
Have you
Not just
been
walk by and
inside the ones that exist now to see if they could meet that?
Well, which ones?
And there's several, so like the bamboo shop,
Yeah, you can go into all of those.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking too, we used to have another business on town that made yarn and made it into hats and things. That would had an area you could step into. You can step into HJB, you can step into the bamboo store. I think for the most part they do. You could have stepped into Carve when we had it. I don't know if the most recent business allows you to step in, the one who's requesting this.
They're not, Reeb does not have an entrance. They're going to start offering
Retail sales.
Well, retail sales and loaners,
So they
loaner
should have a
bikes.
counter.
So, yeah, they'll have something along those lines.
So either maybe my amendment, I'm trying to decide which way to go here, because I think the space is maybe what could also, depending on how their business is set up and structured. I guess you could be very flexible with that, or it's a requirement. It may not be safe sometimes to have the public walking in. Is it really necessary? I don't know. I mean, I totally agree with Trustee Roberts. I mean, all four things, filling up spaces and creating jobs. That brings people downtown, which is great. I don't know if this is really necessary. We could also make it a should instead of a requirement. Is encouraged instead of required. That way you encourage them to make their business open, but I'm not sure it's appropriate in every case or necessary in every case. It really depends on where it is and whether it's on Main Street or is it in a barn that isn't, something people wouldn't necessarily walk up to. So I'm just hold off for right now and see if there's any other discussion on that. But Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, I think some of the concern that's expressed by requiring some kind of either retail or teaching opportunity, whatever, is that in the extreme, I don't think we want all of the businesses on Main Street and other commercial areas to be just closed. And so there's nowhere for people to go as people walk by. I think it's more in sort of the reductio end of things that raise that concern. And also the concern that if you have production, things are being made and potentially being sold elsewhere, that we may be using what otherwise would be retail space, sales tax producing space, and missing opportunities for people to come in and buy stuff here in town and for us to get the sales tax.
Any other comments? All right, there's no other comments. I guess I'm just feeling like this is a little bit rushed. I don't know that I can support it tonight. I want to support it because I think it's a good concept. I want to fill spaces. It's a little bit messy. I think the intent is really good. I'm not sure. I don't know. I think there's a lot of subjectivity to the way that it's written. So it's going to be up to how staff interprets this as to whether something will be allowed ultimately. So I'd prefer it to be a little bit more objectively written. So I'm not going to support it tonight, but I'm fine with it, hopefully kind of being revised enough that it meets the intent. So if there's no other comments, I will, Trustee Farrell.
I'm just curious if, Victoria, do you think that your staff, do you feel that it could be refined?
I think if you allow us to do some fine tuning, we understand the intent. If you want to see that final product before voting on it, we can bring it back next time, so.
We could do that. I do think that you could end up limiting the number of businesses that could come. So some subjectivity is good in a code like this. We don't want to, for instance, in the commercial code, when they allowed for manufacturing as a conditional use, they put a limit on it that was 10 people. And it's a little difficult once you get to 11. If you went from 10 to 11, you wouldn't be allowed there anymore. So that would essentially limit the business. And so what this code tries to do is give you some performance criteria that limits the impact and allows some freedom in interpretation. And by doing so, I think we can interpret it when individual businesses come in.
Yeah, I'll just respond to that. I think you will be able to because you were involved in the creation of it, so you understood the intent. The problem is we all move on, and then someone has to come behind us and say, well, was their intent that this would be allowed or was it not allowed? And it's close. I mean, I think some people understand what artisan means. I have my interpretation of what artisan means. It's just the wording I'm kind of struggling with. I mean, that's my issue. So I just feel like it could use another pass, in my opinion, just to be a little bit, just cleaned it up a little bit. But if the board's happy with it, it won't be the end of the world. All right, I will call for the vote on ordinance 1066. Good, so it passes 6-1. Thank you. Next up on the agenda, hold on. Switching the pages around here. Will the clerk please read the items on consent into the record, please?
Resolution 2019-92, a resolution of the Town of Lyons, Colorado, accepting public improvements for Northern Overflow Channel Project and closeout of construction agreement with DeFalco Construction Company. Resolution 2019-93, a resolution of the Town of Lyons approving a third amendment to the Walsh Construction agreement, and this is for Bowen Park Phase 2. Resolution 2019-95, a resolution accepting an amendment for additional funds to the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment grant, and this is for flood recovery projects. Resolution 2019-96, a resolution of the Town of Lyons, Colorado, approving the First Amendment to the Professional Services Agreement with OTEC Corporation for additional services on the project Parks Construction Management for flood recovery. September 2019 accounts payable, and the August 19 Board of Trustees meeting minutes.
Would anyone like to pull any items from consent? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. Okay, the items are approved 7-0. Thank you. All right, the first item on general business is a discussion and direction. We really actually meant to list this item as a discussion around the enforcement of the noise ordinance, not direction on a noise ordinance. So we invited Sergeant Chris to come back. So maybe we can start there and have you summarize your memo and what you found and kind of what your enforcement has been up to date.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right, so I'll just start off with the memo. It was pointed out earlier today that there was some inaccuracy, so I went back and double-checked my figures. So the sources that I pulled some of those stats from, they're not very far off, but the dispatchers and the people that run this program that take the inbound calls, record them, tabulate them, just wasn't using the correct filter that I was asking for. So I originally had said that there was about 10 complaints. We double and triple checked today, but really we came up with a total of 16 complaints. And that spanned from May 25th to August 31st. The other thing that I confirmed also is that the complaints only still have come from 2 different sources on Kelling Drive. But, you know, it's kind of neither here nor there. The fact of the matter is that there's a noise problem, and I surely see both sides of the issue here. We've been dealing with it all summer. As I've explained before, the noise ordinance is somewhat vague in some areas, but somewhat direct in other areas. And the one thing that I guess I want to point out is that solely issuing a ticket for a noise violation is not the fix to the problem. And we've been trying desperately to find a fix, a solution to what's going on. My deputies have been in contact with the owners on every complaint, the residents on every complaint, as much as practical. Sometimes the noise is done before my deputies ever get here. But during all those contacts, during all those conversations, the constant theme keeps coming back that there needs to be a happy medium for the amount of noise that the Lions Den produces and then the quality of peace for the residents on Kelling Drive. And I will definitely state for the record that I see both sides of this, and I very much sympathize with the residents. The noise ordinance is, it's not necessarily difficult, but I feel that it also opens up a Pandora's box. As soon as we lay down a precedent like this and start issuing a ticket at 7 p.m. for what we feel is unreasonable noise, which the statute will allow us to do, it will become a issue of any noise. And the problem at that point now becomes the interpretation of the statute to a person of ordinary sensitivities, significant annoyance and irritation that they're being caused. So in the past 3 weeks, 3 weeks ago, I directed my deputies to, if we receive a complaint about the noise coming from Lions Den, to not go directly to Lions Den and deal with the complaint, to go actually to the party that's complaining, walk into their house, if so invited, and sit down and say, is this unreasonable to me? And we haven't had that opportunity. Either the noise has been gone, stopped by the time we get there, the noise has not continued, so that hasn't existed. I approached that idea with our town prosecutor, Mr. Starkovich, and he was very much in favor of that to basically bolster a case in court that would stand, that we just don't have one person or two complaining relentlessly about music that they feel is unreasonable. Not saying that it is or not saying that it isn't, but it's something on the other side of the law that I have to look at. I gotta be able to issue a ticket under probable cause that the violation has taken place and that it should hold up in a court of law. Because the noise ordinance is a little bit vague in some areas but very specific in others, it makes it open to interpretation. So the better case that I can provide to the judge and prosecutor, the better off we are of making this happen. But again, it goes back to, you know, we can issue tickets. I could issue 5, 6, 8, 10 tickets. The Lions Den can completely ignore those tickets, go to court, possibly get a fine of, you know, I don't know, 50, 75 bucks, whatever. It's up to the judge. It'd be recurring. And I just think it would open up a mess. What I would really like to see happen is I would like to see everybody come to a reasonable solution so that we can coexist with this problem. If I've done some research, and Trustee Browning provided some information on other towns and their noise ordinances and what they've done. And the big thing that comes to play is the decibel reading level. It's, the folks on Kelly Drive had supplied excellent information and documentation on the decibel readings that they're taking. I'm definitely not in dispute of that. However, in my opinion, what that will bring to the town is a very hardline law, basically like a speed limit law. If you break the speed limit, you're going to get a ticket. So does it make it very enforceable? Yes, it does. I walk out with a noise meter, and if it's a 50 decibel limit and it's 51, I write a ticket. But I think the problem therein lies is there's going to need to be some permits or amendments or what have you to allow certain things to take place in town. Sandstone Music Festival, things at the parks, Planet Bluegrass, Stone Cup does things, I know that. I know Pizza Bar 66 has some music venues, Oscar Blues. It's a music town. So I think it's kind of a slippery slope if we go that direction. And again, that's just my opinion. Does it make it easier to enforce? Absolutely. That's what makes this noise ordinance hard to enforce, because I see both sides of it, but I don't also feel that just going to Lion's Den and not just going there and issuing tickets every time there's a complaint, I feel will run the Lions business, the Lions Den, right out of town. They won't be able to keep up. They'll feel harassed. It will go down, and I don't think that's what we're about. I've heard in the 3 years that I've been here and the 19 years as a sheriff's deputy servicing this town in other capacities, the philosophy of this town, and we hear it every day. We're trying to bring businesses in, bring people in, get them to stop. We're talking about a corridor slowdown instead of speed through. I mean, there's a lot of dynamics here, but I think in there's a happy medium. I really do, and I think it's going to start at an offline roundtable discussion with those invested parties to see if there's some type of resolution we can come to. I believe that Victoria has a few other options that she'll lay out, but that's how it's been for us at this point in time. There's been weekends where we've had no complaints, but according to the residents on Kelling, that's because they're so fed up they've left. So a lot of times if I'm not hearing that there's no complaints, I'm feeling like, okay, the Lions Den's doing what they're supposed to be doing. So, everything is a little bit ambiguous when it comes to that, but there are a lot of facts that we have to go on. The other issue with the noise ordinance is 3 out of the 4 subsections list a time frame of 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. And those all reference, vehicles, engines, repair type stuff. The only subsection that does not list that time frame is the electrically amplified sound. So there again, at 7 o'clock, 7:30, 8 o'clock, what's unreasonable for the Lions Den to have loud music and to what level? That's where I feel that setting a precedence and starting to just write tickets because there is a noise complaint that fits this is not the most appropriate action. Is it valid and possible? Yes. I've instructed my deputies to use extreme discretion, make sure that it's 100%. I've been advised by the town prosecutor and the judge to, if at all possible, have 2 or more folks for that initial complaint to help it bolstered in court so that it will stand. I don't know what the penalties are. They are open to the judge, so she has a wide range of penalties. I don't see them being extremely stiff, but if 9 complaints came through and the Lions Den's in here every single month dealing with multiple charges and multiple complaints, they'll probably leave town. And I don't want to see that either. So we do feel like at the sheriff's office that we are stuck a little bit between a rock and a hard place. I'm trying to appease the town, the board, the residents on Kelling, and the owners of Lions Den. We haven't had great success with the owners of Lions Den. However, all of my deputies supplement a report that unfortunately I did not get into the packet. But reading through those supplements, the Lions Den has regularly turned the music down or off. Most of the times they're before 10 o'clock, at least the ones that are documented in the supplemental reports. So there could definitely be complaints in there that were not supplemented. A lot of times we have deputies that come up at night that are filling in for our regular guys that might not be aware of the process that I've instructed. So, it's not 100% and totally, the gospel, but that's what we've been trying to do. I do know that the last couple complaints, I've actually told the guys, call me direct at home. You get a call about Lions Den, I want to know right now before you even go. I want to hear what's going on from your point of view, and I want to hear the call through whether I'm working or not, because I'm not usually working those nights. I've taken numerous calls at home, numerous calls on vacation, and calls, when I'm not working, just to try to walk these officers through. And the last 2 out of 3 times, I believe that the noise was off by the time the deputy ever got there, well before 10. I had one deputy call me back and say, well, I'm here, it's dead quiet, it's 9:20, the drums are in their cases, the microphones are unplugged, and there's nothing going on. It is a very much a sticky situation. And again, I sympathize with all parties involved. I want the Lions Den to succeed, but I very much feel for the residents on Kelling. I feel their pain. They've been coming to board meetings and have been voicing their struggles, and they're real. I don't think that they would come here if they weren't. So I'd like to come to some type of resolution, and I think open communication really right now is the first step, so that everybody that's invested in this issue has a stake in the game and a say of what we should do or could do, and work it from there. I don't know what the future of Lions Den as far as like the summer season is for them. I don't know what they're booking throughout the rest of it or what their intent is, but I would assume that it would subside to some level. And I think we're at the right time to get the issue out on the table when, for lack of a better term, cooler heads can prevail and we can sit down and discuss it.
Are there questions for Sergeant Christ? Trustee Farrell?
Well, I'm not sure if this is the right question actually for you, but maybe. Has there been any of the two parties coming together?
At this point in time, I don't believe so.
You
Not-
would be
not to my
part of a
knowledge.
discussion or anything?
No.
Just a question. So why do you think a ticketing would result only with them leaving town? Do you think a ticket wouldn't motivate them to maybe find some other measures that might reduce sound?
No, I
Maybe
think-
would they go more acoustic more often? Maybe.
No, it's very possible. I guess when I say that, what I'm trying to say is that because of the way that the code is written, it becomes very interpretive to the complainant that's calling in about the irritation they feel and the noise that they hear. We are granted by, the whole prima facie unreasonableness contact that if we show up on face value, it doesn't mean that it's unreasonable just because it's listed here. If it's not unreasonable, then it's not. So at some point in time, if we ticket and they conform to that and we get a complaint and we show up and we say, you know what, they've turned it down, this is not unreasonable, we're kind of back in the same boat where we're still getting the complaints. The residents still feel that the music's too loud. I guess the real answer to that is, at what level does it become too loud and what level is acceptable to both sides? A ticket could help. I'm not saying that it won't, and I'm not saying I'm not willing to issue a ticket. I feel like there's a saying with like traffic tickets. You pull someone over and give them a warning, and usually their driving behavior corrects for about a month or two because they almost got a ticket, right? And then they go back to their normal ways. So with that philosophy a little bit, all I'm trying to say is just a ticket isn't the answer 100%. It's not going to fix the overall problem. It could very well agitate the problem.
And let me just say, I think this is absolutely not the best use of your time, your deputy's time, or the court's time to solve it this way. But I guess we've been so focused on, is our current ordinance deficient? And I do think there are some ways to make it objective. So, if you're standing in someone's house and you can still hear it, That right there seems to violate the ordinance because it's loud enough that you've intruded on another person's residence from the inside.
I guess the point to
It's
that is.
about how do you, get to
Well,
a deputy there to make that judgment, I guess, but.
Well, it'll go back to the level of sound, because you can stand in, especially a residence on Kelling Drive that's very close to the Lion's Den. I mean, we get complaints of them when their staff is cleaning up at night, and they're loud, talking, laughing, clanking of bottles, whatever. That is very loud to the residents, and that's not even amplified sound at all.
But this is specific to amplified sound.
Oh, yeah, I know.
So
That's
it's
what I'm
really
saying.
about music.
Well, that's what I'm
This one,
saying. So
yeah.
as soon as the amplified music gets turned on, you're going to hear it.
Mhm.
You're going to hear it. So what's the rule then? No amplified sound at the Lion's Den?
Well, I'm just saying that the
Because that's what the
ordinance
statute
does
holds.
allow you to ticket it
It
if
does
they
allow
have
me.
amplified sound.
But
Let
it
me
has to
just
be
say,
unreasonable. It has to be unreasonable.
it.
We have that clause in there.
I guess my thought on this is that everywhere else where this has come up, we have solved this through the zoning process. It's either been an overlay district or it's part of their PUD. The last two times that we've dealt with noise as a board. When it was weddings, we did it through their PUD as part of their zoning allowances, or we've made a buffer zone between businesses and residential. And so, there's ways to enforce the ordinance. I get your point that that's maybe not the best route to go, but that's where we are. And my understanding was that was what the last outcome of the board discussion was, is that we wanted to manage this through enforcement, not go down the road of a noise ordinance or go down the road of zoning. My question is, are there any other alternatives that we could explore? And we talked about it earlier today. I'm just thinking, is there a way to create a permit process, but it's got to apply to everybody? That means every business in town who wants to have music is going to have to go through a permit process that's probably similar to what we do for liquor licenses, special events. That's a lot of administrative work, but it's doable. That's one possibility. I don't know if staff have other options they want the board to consider.
Yes, Mayor Sullivan. We ran through a handful of different potential options to try to evaluate, at least in the quick amount of time it's been since this afternoon, the feasibility of each. First, of course, the noise ordinance based off of decibel limits. We've kind of discussed the cons of that potential approach. Second, as you were just mentioning, the overlay process could be amended or it could be expanded to include this particular business to set some additional limitations on use of amplified sound. A third option that was discussed was a moratorium in the meantime on all amplified sound in town. Having reviewed quickly the case law on that, I don't think it's a feasible option. The courts have held that a blanket ban of amplified sound violates people's First Amendment right of free expression, so that's not really a realistic option. The next one we looked at is a permitting system that you kind of briefly mentioned. I have kind of looked around at different municipalities that kind of fit the same character as Lions, and many do employ a permitting system. Fruta, for example, is an example where all amplified sound has to be put through a permitting system. Once again, you have to be careful on how you do that as not to violate the First Amendment protections. It can't be based on content, it can only be based on the time, place, and manner restrictions of the speech itself. And so we'd be very careful in how that was crafted, but that's one potential option. And of course, the fifth option is to do nothing and try to use, kind of non-legal remedies to resolve this issue, mediation, informal, when I say mediation, I mean informal mediation where the sheriff's office could sit down with the two parties and try to talk out some sort of reasonable solution. And those are kind of the ones we were able to brainstorm. And I'd be happy to answer any additional questions about any of those options.
Trustee Browning?
Yeah, I had a question of Sergeant Chris first. One of the towns that I got a sample ordinance of was Nederland, and it was sort of unique. It's also in Boulder County. Mm-hmm. It's sort of unique in that it allows decibel-based sound above the state law limits. A lot of the other towns had changed the time limitations in the state law, in the state statute, but Nederland actually allowed louder music or louder sound of any kind, I guess, in the ordinance. And I was wondering if the Boulder County Sheriff's Office, does it work Nederland?
Yes and no. We have a very small subcontract with them only at night in the late hours because their police force is not strong enough to support. So we don't necessarily go in there and enforce their immunity stuff.
Are you aware of any complaints, issues with the Netherland noise ordinance? I was wondering if it had been challenged or
not a single one.
enforced
They're
or-
on our radio systems. We dispatch for them, so I hear all of their calls that come out.
Okay. And then I have questions for the town
Okay, go
attorney. I don't know
ahead.
if we can do it now or.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. The existing state statute, I've read it, and within it's I don't know, eight or nine sections in a row, there's two different preemption sentences in there. One in the 103, which is the basic noise statute, and another whole section about preemption that the language I find very confusing. Could you discuss the town's ability to do, if it wanted to do what Netherland did, and instead of the 50 and 55 decibel limits and the 7 p.m. time limits that are in the state statute, if we wanted to do 70 and 75 decibel limits and, 9 o'clock instead of 7 o'clock, do we have the ability to do that?
As a practical matter, yes. If you look at decibel limits and time restrictions across the state, they're all vary quite wildly depending on which ones you look at. Littleton, for example, has two different standards, one based on events and one based on non-events like traffic noise and city noise. And so I'm not aware of any. The state statute itself has been challenged as whether it's a constitutional or not, and the courts have held that it is constitutional. But I'm not aware of any local government which has had a sound ordinance attacked from the perspective that it was preempted by the state law. Okay. Typically, when you see a local sound ordinance challenge, it's on the basis of constitutional rights and not on the basis of preemption under state law.
If we left the existing ordinance as is, and any business, could be Lions Den, could be another one, wanted to challenge it on the basis of vagueness, what would the process be? I mean, it starts off in our local court, right, with the prosecutor in the local court defending it and the judge having to make a ruling. But if somebody wants to take it beyond that level and challenge it for either constitutionality, for free speech reasons, or vagueness, or whatever grounds they might want to challenge it, what would the town's involvement be and potential legal expense be in defending that ordinance as it went up the court system?
So it would go to district court, Boulder County District Court would be appealed to, and probably. They can make a potential claim on the U.S. Constitution, but most likely it would be go to Boulder District Court. I will say that the state disorderly conduct statute does use unreasonable sound as one of its potential issues. It's very similar to, it's probably where the Lions Code is actually based off of, and that has specifically been challenged, and this Colorado Supreme Court has found that basically the same language that we have in our code is not unconstitutional for vagueness.
I mean, the reasonable person standard, basically.
Correct. Yeah, the reasonable person standard is pervasive throughout state criminal codes, and that an average person can understand what a reasonable person finds to be unreasonable, and that is not unconstitutional for vagueness.
Other questions?
One more, too.
Okay,
The way
one more.
I read the state statute to create potentially a private cause of action. If any citizen wanted to pursue a nuisance civil complaint on their own, they could. Is that the way you read it also?
Yeah, you can certainly, and I've seen it happen in person many times where people have pursued private cause of action based on a nuisance theory for noise. I've seen it play out personally.
In fact, the statute strangely mentions individuals and it mentions counties. It's kind of silent on municipalities' enforcement, I guess.
I mean,
since we can pass a local noise ordinance, and we have, whether it's vague or not,
right?
We, I guess, impliedly have the ability to enforce it, or if there are general powers. But it's kind of odd that it didn't mention municipalities in the statute.
Usually, we have not to get too far into legalese world, but we have a parents patrie standing to basically protect the rights of the citizens, right. And so we could use their standing to sue on behalf of the citizens. And usually where it says counties, this usually gets applied to also other local governments, so.
Okay. And one other thing that I saw in several of these statutes, it seems to me fairly common, and in fact, it's in the state statute as well, that municipalities, if I read it right, tend to exempt public events in public parks. You know, not everybody doesn't. Denver still, I know, has noise ordinances that apply to events in public parks, but things like the Sandstone concerts, outdoor games, something like that, if they're town-sponsored events. Have you seen other local ordinances that exempt those from the noise ordinance?
SS Park and Littleton are two that I've seen. I think Fruita might as well. I tried to look at places I thought were similar in character, and of course Littleton, because I'm very familiar with their code. But those three do, but I think you're right, some do and some don't. It's just a policy decision by the municipality.
And I guess the theory is if the municipality itself is running the event or setting rules by contract with the sponsors, then it really is in control of it can control the noise that way instead of having to use a general noise ordinance. Is that kind of the
correct? And then
rationale?
also responsive to the needs of the electorate is the theory. Yeah. So,
Okay, Trustee Farrell?
Could you give me an idea then of what a possible mediation would look like? So Sergeant Christie would be involved in it, and the two residents and the business. Is it just the three groups sitting down? Town is involved?
I would think the town would need to be involved, and the residents and the folks at Lions Den and myself. We have mediation companies that we work through the county, where we have someone that can come in and at least coordinate the meeting to keep it under control and set the ground rules and make it a productive meeting, so that, for lack of a better term, it's not, a yelling match or a complaint session that goes nowhere. So we have contracted with these folks time and time again. We have some, I have avenues to tap into that. So my feeling is to at least get in the same room around the same table first and, voice out the grievances that are there, the effect that it's having. And a lot of times, if the owners of the Lions Den are not sensitive to that, they're at least hearing it from the people. And I think that will speak volumes, that everybody's willing to at least sit down and discuss it and try to solve it without going into a lot of this kind of stuff, and make it a hard and fast rule and draw a line in the sand that, 50 decibels is too loud and 49 is okay, that type of stuff. So that's what I would envision. A rep from the town, myself, a rep from the Lions Den, and patrons from or residents from Kelly.
Okay, so two questions then. So once, let's say, parties come together, there's an agreement that's made, how is that enforced?
Well, I don't know necessarily enforced is the right term, because it's not like.
Upheld, or?
I'm sorry?
Once you've agreed on.
Yeah.
Once we've agreed on something, we can surely just get it in paper, get it in writing. There could be if this, that, if you can't hold up the agreement, I'll come out and start issuing tickets. And it's not to say that I won't issue tickets now or this weekend. I'm not saying that. I want to make that very clear. I'm just trying to find a better solution to all of this than that as the primary.
Then who also would pay for the mediation?
I'll do it on any time you want, work time or volunteer time.
Well, but
You don't have to
is
pay
this
me.
between the two parties, frankly?
The facilitator, I think we can run that through the department, through the sheriff's office. I can look into that for sure. So.
Okay. So I guess my first initial reaction is, I'm just going to go ahead and state my opinion now. I think a mediation sounds like it would be a really good thing. The parties have not come together and tried, is my impression at this point.
To the best of my knowledge, no, they haven't.
And I think there's a lot of value in that. We're a small town, and we are neighbors, business and residents. And I think that's really, that should happen, in my opinion. But besides all the other options, I am for us creating an overlay for this particular area, but not just here, but I actually think that, as time goes on, it could carry all the way down to our eastern corridor. So I feel like we actually maybe have an opportunity to think short-term and long-term. But one thing I would like to caution is I think it would need to be something different than what we have in our Main Street downtown, which is very commercially oriented. I think once we go beyond kind of Main Street, the one-way and Broadway, as we head east, you've got a lot more residents involved. And so I think some of the parameters might be different. But I would not want to set up our town administration with special permits that could then create a tremendous amount of work on their part. And then that also ties our hands as a town on our own special events that we want to have music, because we don't know what we might create. There are certainly other opportunities for us to have special events, and they're going to have certain amounts of noise level to them. And so I don't want us to tie our hands and get ourselves into a situation that then really limits our town in what our offerings are. So, quick summary, I think we should mediate, or I think the parties should mediate, and then I actually think that we should consider an overlay district.
Well, I totally concur with that. My options are limited. I have one option left. I can just go write tickets and walk away from all this, and that's just not how I think it's the right way to police and the right way to solve problems, because I am out of solutions. I really have minimal amounts of tricks in my bag, but mediation and problem solving it goes deep, and I've seen it work in a lot of other areas of my job, community disputes, neighbor disputes, civil disputes, boundary line disputes, all kinds of stuff, where that really becomes a bigger issue. I can send them to court, and the judge can decide, and that'll be that, and the problem will still be there the next weekend. So I concur with your opinions 100%.
So Trustee Miller and then Trustee Roberts. Trustee Browning, can you turn off your microphone,
sorry.
please, so I can get everybody on? Okay, Trustee Miller, thanks.
It was my understanding after the last time that we discussed this that we were going to try and get the parties together to mediate anyway. So I'm not sure what happened with that, but maybe I misunderstood. Not with you, but with Victoria and the.
So the last time we all three talked, it was me, Victoria, and Kelly from Lion's Den.
Oh, okay.
And we specifically had a conversation very much relevant to what we're talking about now. Basically, during that conversation, we tried to put the screws down and thumb on them and say, look, it's coming, get ready, because if we get one more complaint, the sheriffs will be over there. She understood that. She wanted us to talk to her co-owner, Randall, who we could never get a hold of, so we weren't able to talk to him on a conference call. So that's basically where that conversation was left. And me and Victoria and Kelly were involved with that. That's the only conversation I know that all three of us had.
Well, I was referring to getting the neighbors together with the Lions Den owners.
I think we encouraged them to get together.
Oh, okay,
If
maybe.
they chose to, but I don't believe that happened.
Okay.
That wasn't facilitated.
Yeah, I didn't have
officially,
that on my
guess.
radar to facilitate.
Okay, well, I think that that's a wonderful idea.
Okay.
I think that's the way that we should move with this whole problem. I have spoken to the Lions Den owners myself, and Randall has seemed to be willing to do whatever it takes to help with this issue, and getting the neighbors to be, happy with the situation, whether it means baffles or whatever. So I think that there could be an amicable agreement between all of the parties involved.
I wholeheartedly agree.
So-
I'd be willing to spearhead that.
Yeah.
As the main contact.
I
I seem to
think-
be right in the middle of everybody anyways. So
Go for it.
I've got every connection. So, it is something that we do. That is what we do. That's what my job is. So.
Yeah, before we start trying to write more stuff.
Sergeant Chris, I join with my colleagues in expressing that I think we all hope that we can have some kind of mediation process. It's understandable to me that those who have frustration that 2.5, 3 months later since we first had someone speak here that we sort of seem to be in the same place. I don't think we savor the idea of issuing fines to our businesses, but then we've also, a number of us expressed that we expect that law enforcement can enforce our noise ordinance. And I think of this business is unique in a sense, not entirely unique, but every other business that's in the downtown area anyway that has live music is in an overlay district, and this one is not. And so this 24-hour prohibition of amplified music, it's always a violation if someone can hear it audibly within 25. I mean, we know the details, and we have, I believe you told us the last meeting that we're done with warnings, that we're going to have citations. And again, we're not excited about finding people, but if we thought that perhaps this sting is going to be a motivator, perhaps it would be, but we don't know because it hasn't happened. And we also, again, perhaps that could have motivated some kind of dialogue, and we just don't know. So, I mean, I guess I think it's fair that we wish that what we expected to occur had, just so that we could say like, well, we tried that or what have you. It's uncomfortable to talk about singling out a single business, and I think it's the same thing as that our ordinance covers every residence to protect from a nuisance noise, and should we also think about, do we single out one or two residents to not provide the same protection of our municipal code that applies to everyone in town? I do feel how frustrating and complicated it is that you don't have a clear-cut way to address the situation. And I think we all also feel frustrated that we can't see that either. We have occasionally loud concerts in businesses in town, and I say others occasionally, and there may be a complaint, but there's not going to be another loud concert at the Fork for another 2 years or something of that same magnitude. I want to make an observation from my professional experience, and I don't know if it's how pertinent it is at this time, but I know that you discussed that the sound's been turned down in volume at times, and it's important to understand there's two sound systems in a live music performance. There's one for the audience, and then there's one for the performers, and it's a separate PA system, and it's aimed at Kelling Drive and at First Avenue and what have you. And part of that is also just the acoustic, the sound from drums and from electric guitar amps that are not in that PA system. So that's a separate issue of how much power of sound is directed at the neighbors than what's in the PA that faces the audience and Main Street. Now, some bands play with a loud stage sound and some don't. And I've personally witnessed bands, a variety of loudnesses up on Kelling Drive. And it's not just a matter of like, oh, this is an acoustic guitar player versus a loud rock band. I've heard a full rock band with drums and electric bass that was as loud as the traffic passing, and not like loud traffic, but just regular traffic passing. And then I've heard others that were just tremendously loud and at a distance, and so I don't know really if that helps, but I can just say I can communicate that there's ways that the problem could possibly be at least reduced with I don't know. I guess I think of it as sort of a professional and sensible approach to performing as a rock band, and. Let's see. Let's see if I had another note. I mean, I don't know we're not going to make a decision about anything tonight. We're here to just discuss with
So we
Sergeant
can give
Chris.
direction,
Right.
decide what direction we want to go.
Mhm.
Why don't we let Mayor Pro Tem go, and then
Yes,
we'll
please.
come back? And-
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, and actually building on Trustee Roberts' comments, and on, I have a lot of faith in an organized problem-solving process. I've seen it work. That was like 26 years of my life was, if you didn't go through a formal problem-solving process and tried to move forward with a project, you weren't going anywhere. And so I really like the idea of someone who is trained in guiding people through a formal, documented problem-solving process. And one of the steps in a problem-solving process is facts. Facts known, facts that you don't know, and so forth. And also establishing an understanding of what it is you want. What conditions would you like to establish in the long run? And working toward that. Amazingly, it does force people to focus on what the actual issue is and can move forward with that. And I think in this circumstance, there's the added point that the default is probably ticket issuing. So in other words, when you come to the table, everybody would know that the default, if you can't solve it, the default's going to end up issuing tickets, and that will have not all good, it'll have, not all good results. And so establishing the criteria for what will make a good result, and it could then serve as the basis for an overlay change, the information that comes out of that discussion with some of the facts that Trustee Roberts is introducing. Also, it could serve as a foundation for an adjustment to the ordinance. Or some other documented solution so that you can come back and enforce the documentation that comes out of it. But I really like the idea of there being a facilitated problem-solving process that includes the town, the residents, the sheriff's office, and the Lions Den.
So I'll just say, I think I concur with the mediation. I think it's worth a try. I think it's the best short-term solution that gets people immediate results. But any solutions that come from that are essentially voluntary to the business.
Right.
So we're not mandating they really do anything. We're just hoping that it works out. I will say, I think not in a formal way, what you're recommending, but we've seen that try to play itself out before with some other businesses, and moderate success with that. So I think that there's definitely, I think if the residents are willing and the business is willing and people come with the right frame of mind, I think you can get to a good solution that way. I'm not sure. I mean, I think we'd have to try it and see what happens. I agree with Trustee Farrell that an overlay seems like the fair way to do it. That's how we manage all other businesses. It's kind of our standard to do it through the zoning process, but that also takes time. That's not a quick solution. That's going to take many months of public input and figuring out what's right for not just this business, but for a broader stretch, because I agree, it's this business this time. It's a different business next time when they change ownership or use or something like that. So a best long-term solution, in my opinion, is to do an overlay like we do everywhere else. My concern about using the noise ordinance is it could be a solution, but it's a really blunt tool and it will impact everywhere in town. I'm not worried about the town-sponsored events because those are easy to exempt, but we may save one business to ruin several others in the process, or other events. So, I think that that's also not a very expedient process either. I want to relieve you and your staff of getting these calls. I totally agree with you. The issuing tickets is really not the answer. It could produce some short-term incentive, maybe. When maybe the warnings aren't getting through, sometimes it can cause enough pain for someone to say, okay, maybe I do need to invest in more equipment that baffles sound or whatever, because ultimately I'm going to spend that money in tickets if I don't do it. I mean, there's lots of reasons why people don't make investments, because if they're getting away with it, why invest in it? You know, ultimately, if I could just shut it down as soon as I know complaints might come in, then maybe, you know, I get through the next several weeks of events or whatever. You know, but just having kind of been through this before, I think generally it takes something more, but I am totally on board with trying the mediation and seeing if everyone can come to at least some short-term resolution and understand what those conditions might be that we might be able to build on. But I still think it's worth looking at a possible overlay for this area like we have in other areas of town, because I don't think it's the last time we'll hear this. Trustee Carabas.
Won't drag it out any longer, but I'll concur with everything you said. Short-term voluntary mediation, if we can get it going right away, and if there's, I would say if there's any pushback from the Lions Den and delaying it, that start issuing tickets. That's the way it is.
I concur.
And overlay is going to take a long time, because our PCDC, as we know, their plate is full through the end of the year and probably early into 2020. But it is a way to look, and I agree with Trustee Farrell that it's not just one block on Main Street there. I'm thinking we're going to have to just go all the way out to minimum of 36, 66, if not include the eastern corridor on both sides of the highway all the way down.
Trustee Browning?
Yeah, a few comments. Yes, a mediated solution would be the best. It could well be that a mediated solution may end up with some needed revisions to the noise ordinance anyway, particularly when it comes to time limits. You know, I can obviously see that as one issue that the neighbors and the business says we need to have a certain number of hours open. Neighbors say, you know, 9 o'clock's reasonable bedtime or whatever it may be. So just going to mediation doesn't necessarily forego the need for ordinance revisions, but you know, rather than us drafting it and hashing it out as we did with the overlay district, perhaps something that comes from both business and residents through a mediation process is the better way to go about drafting that. Our current ordinance is defective, as Sergeant Christ has said. It references sound audible 25 feet from the source, doesn't specify whether that's inside or outside. I do think that it's the responsibility of the town board to set policy in this area and not duck that responsibility onto the sheriff's office. They enforce whatever policy we set. Right now, the policy that the Board of Trustees has set is in a very vague, poorly crafted ordinance that doesn't even address time limits or decibel limits for audible sound, again, as Sergeant Christ has said. If we're going to have the sheriff's office do enforcement, we need to give them something reasonable and specific enough to let them enforce it. A permit system, I'm not in favor of that. You still need standards for permits. Somebody comes in and says, I want a permit to operate till 11 o'clock at, you know, amplified rock music. What's the staff's direction on whether to issue that permit or not? You still have a responsibility at the board level to set standards for permits. I don't think an overlay district is the way to go. It's not the common way we do things. We have one overlay district downtown. Potential outdoor music venues differ from one end of town to the other. What's reasonable at the distillery might not be reasonable at Lions Den and may be reasonable at the Fork. And I think you'll end up with multiple overlay districts or one town-wide overlay district that's so complicated that it becomes extremely difficult to do. We had enough trouble with the one small area overlay district we have now. I can't see expanding that town-wide to cover widely varying residential and commercial areas. I do think that ultimately where we need to get is exactly what Sergeant Chris suggested, and that's some compromise in the middle in terms of hours and noise levels. I could never support an ordinance or an overlay district or a permitting system that basically outlawed outdoor amplified music in Lions. I think we are a music town, and I think with reasonable time and noise limits, we need to allow outdoor amplified music in Lions. On the other hand, residents are entitled to peace and quiet during, particularly on work nights and school nights, reasonable hours and limits that don't make it impossible to sleep. So if we can get to that happy medium through a mediation process, I'm all for it. If we can't, I think it's the responsibility of this board to take up an enforceable, reasonable, well-drafted noise ordinance. We don't have that now, and I don't think it's fair for the board to defer responsibility for enforcing that ordinance to the sheriff's office.
So I want to clarify, because what I'm kind of hearing you say, Sergeant Christ, is that you could enforce the ordinance right now. It's just that ticket writing isn't the best way to resolve this.
Well, it's all in, it's black and white. It's the letter of the law, and I don't think the letter of the law on a speed limit is 1 over your speeding, and I can write 1 to 5 tickets over in this town and really create a lot of enemies doing that. I just don't think the spirit of the law, the way the ordinance is written, it really pushes for that, and that's what I struggle with.
So if it did have a decibel limit, let's just say,
Or a time limit.
or a time
It would
limit.
be much easier.
I mean, it has a time limit kind of right now. It's just 10 p.m., but
Well, it doesn't. It's the outdoor, electrically amplified does
that
not
piece
list
does
that.
not.
That piece does
but
not.
the
and that's the piece-
reasonable kind of piece of it does.
Right. And reasonable is objectionable. It's what's reasonable to you might not be to me or the residents on Kelling or the people that are trying to make a living. That's, I think we can all get to an area where we all believe it's unreasonable. I don't think it's that far-fetched. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that that's where it just becomes a little ambiguous.
I guess the question, you guys make judgment calls all the time in
we
both
do.
directions.
Mhm.
People have clearly broken the law. You may not issue a ticket based on the circumstances.
Correct.
Sometimes, maybe they're not technically breaking the law, but they are clearly out of control and you need to do something about it. So I guess my point is that I don't know if there is such thing as a perfect ordinance that's going to lay it out for you every time. There's always going to be some judgment probably involved. But technically, I read this as if you go and stand in someone's house and you can hear electrically amplified music, they are in violation of this current ordinance and you could write a ticket.
You're absolutely right.
But I'm hearing you say is that's not the way you want to police this and it's not the
Correct.
solution to this
Correct,
problem.
because where's that level? Where does that become a level? Okay, I start writing a ticket to Lion's Den, and then I get a call from somebody on Kelling Drive, and I send a deputy out there, and he stands in the kitchen, and he can hear it, but it's not unreasonable to him, but it's unreasonable to the resident on Kelling Drive, then what do I do? Well, the president said, write a ticket. So now that's where I'm going down the rabbit hole, and that's what makes it difficult. I've got 2 night shift deputies that have worked this town, okay, at the start of this. One of them doesn't work the town now, but he was very much, give me the ticket book, I'm going to write these guys. He was very adamant about it. I've got the guy that works on the back half of the week that sees more of it, who has a little bit different attitude towards it, and his discretion and the other deputy's discretion aren't in line. And that's normal, and I'm trying to get them to be on that same page and to kind of funnel into that happy medium, but you're absolutely right. We can go write that, but it does not feel right, and I don't want to have to stand up here in front of the judge and explain that, well, because I heard music and this statute says this, that's poor business.
Well, but aren't we going to have the same problem if we have a decibel limit and it's like, okay, it's over the limit, I have to write you a ticket, and we're just going to do that every time? I guess what I'm hearing you say is that this is an enforcement challenge.
It is very much.
It's not an ordinance challenge as much as it's an enforcement challenge.
Both. It's both.
I guess what we're saying, though, and I guess what the board said last time was enforce the ordinance a little bit and try it and see what impact that has. And so that's the question is there value in some level of enforcement, writing tickets? Now, granted, it's got to be timed up right, and you got to get there while you can witness the issues. What that probably means is people will pick up the phone earlier in the evening, potentially, when it starts versus when they want to go to bed or when they're putting their kids to bed. I don't know, but I still get at, we can write a perfect ordinance, but ultimately we are using our law enforcement safety officers' time to address noise. And that's not, to me, that's not the right answer here. So I think I've heard at least maybe there's consensus on mediation. I'm not sure there's consensus on what else we might want to consider doing. So is the board okay with direction to go forward with mediation as an opportunity and say, can we get the parties together and get some discussion going and see what comes of that and go there next?
I'm all for that, and I will concede that if we have a major complaint again, you know, I can try a ticket, but I mean, you kind of hit the nail on the head. I'm going to get a complaint at 6:30 or 7 o'clock because it's too loud.
And loud noise
I
at
just-
6:30
I
or
don't know
something
if
like
that's
is
the
different than
message
loud
this town
noise at
wants to send
9:30 at
out.
night. I think most people would say, yeah, different times, I'm going to have a different sensitivity potentially.
Ow.
But,
Yeah, well,
yeah.
I use 10 o'clock only because I fall back with the county ordinance as well. So everything on the county ordinance says 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. Basically, you can do what you need to do. It's going to be loud up until those hours. And I also use the 10 p.m. only because the other 3 subsections do list that. So it seems fair to me to say, okay, you know what? We're just going to loop this in. We're going to call that a faux pas on the way this thing was written or however. But that to me is a kind of a guideline that I can say, you know, 10 o'clock to me is reasonable. But to somebody on Kelly Drive with a third grader trying to go to school, it might not be.
So I think what I heard is let's try some mediation, truly facilitated mediation with the staff, if the parties are willing. So we'll go there and see if there's interest in that step. And you can, I guess, I think what I'm hearing the sergeant say is they want to continue to use their judgment on whether or not to issue tickets on the ordinance, so.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, you know, and I'm sorry that I am so perplexed with it, but, you know, as a police officer, there's certain things, like you just said, that I come upon that it's like, oh my God, you're getting a ticket, and I'm going to hit you every which way from Sunday on this because you're being so stupid, or whatever. But there are also just times where it's, especially since I'm granted this power to do things like this, that I have to use that with very reasonable discretion, and I feel like I am. I really do. I feel like I'm really on the fence, 49.9%, one way or the other. In fact, I'm sometimes worried if they catch me in a bad mood, they're going to get a ticket. So, you know, I don't know. I really try to leave it to the deputies to make that discretion, and that's why I reached out to Judge Brown and Prosecutor Starkovich to say, for some guidance on that, and to also understand the bigger picture and the backside of what it's going to take to make this stuff stick. They've given me that guidance, and I'm working on that. 2 or more complaints, send the deputy out if it's unreasonable to them, write a freaking ticket. We've been doing this long enough. Yes, I grant that. The first few months, there was a lot of miscommunication on what we were getting from the folks from Lions Den, because when I was sending the guys out, they're coming back, the Lions Den says that they have permits to do this. And I'm like, okay, if they got permits, it's up to the town. You know, well, that went on for a good 3 weeks before we discovered that they don't have a permit for that. You know, so things move a little slowly. It's not as big of a picture that we're just not idly standing by, issuing warning after warning. Things, I believe, have gotten better. From the reports that I get, the music is not, we're not getting those calls at 12 o'clock. They're all coming in around 9. They're all done around 9:30. The music's done. The last 3 noise complaints that we've had, the officers are there talking to me. I'm looking at my clock. It's 9:25. There's no music. So it seems to me at the beginning of the summer, it really was amplified and running late and all that. And we've at least shifted the curve down to some reasonable time by the warnings and showing up and stuff like that. And maybe the Lions Den is understanding that, you know, really 10 o'clock is our deadline. We really can't do this after 10. So I feel like we've gained some ground. And maybe the mediation will push it further.
Okay, so I think we kind of had a good discussion. I would like, though, before we conclude, is have the staff or town attorney just so people understand why we can't just go demand they stop and not have it. Why can't we just tell one business, you can't have this anymore? Just so people understand kind of the limits of the authority.
I mean, right now, it's permitted under the town code to do this. And so it'd be a violation of our own town code. There's also potentially First Amendment issues where we're limiting someone's speech. Or, we can only place time, place, and manner restrictions on speech. But that's kind of what the code is looking at. It's looking at unreasonable forms of speech, like excessively loud. And so unless we have, and the enforcement authority is a sheriff's office, the town can't unilaterally make that determination.
So where is it permitted, I guess, just because I think people are under the impression that I can personally kind of go out there and tell them to stop playing music, and I can't. I think that there's a disconnect between the board's role versus the staff's role versus the sergeant's role.
The board's role is to set the policy, right? And it's, administratively, the town staff can enforce the code. And then if it's criminally, it's the sheriff's office can enforce the code. So that's kind of where the responsibility lies. It's not the board's power or ability in any way to enforce the code. So the mayor or any individual trustee can go out and personally enforce the code. It has to be done through either town staff, if it's administrative, or through the sheriff's office if it's criminal.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that.
Yep.
Okay, thank you for staying late tonight
Absolutely.
on your day off.
No
Or do you work
No, I'm
Mondays
working
now?
now. I adjusted my
You're
hours.
actually getting paid tonight? That's good
No
for you.
worries.
All right,
been here regardless.
is there a motion to take a short break?
So moved.
Move on. Is there a second?
I'll second.
I'll call for the vote. 7-0, we'll take a short, brief break. Yes.
Would there be any interest in swapping the last two general business items as we have?
Sure.
We have participants from the public.
Yeah, I'm
for
sorry
item
that
3.
we're taking a quick break, but 9 o'clock is usually as long as we can sit here without some sort of break. So yeah, we'll be happy to reverse those two.
Thank you.
Not bad, not too bad. I'm just sitting, everything just.
Get stiff.
Yeah, and I'm at the itchy phase with all this, so I was trying not to itch things. Oh, that's what I was like.
So we just take it on the chin until we go to our meeting.
On this side,
So we just gotta
it's like, I should have brought ice back. Think better. But it's fine moving around, you get moving, you're okay. But it's just sitting and sleeping. First thing. I think I'll make it.
Numbers, it hasn't been that way. You've been seeing that, and it's been very precise, extremely precise. And the sound is, I've already tried to propose that. I will not sit down with someone personally, because if I'm at their place, they can call you and say I'm abusive. I'm arrested, you see what I'm saying? We're talking law. Oh, absolutely. That's right now. You said in your letter, 85 to 90 hours is carrying protection, and we're here with damage occurs if you notice in my reading. I've also talked to three of the police, one of them came back from paternity leave. He's not been in the house, young Latino. Perez, he's been on Victoria. The other deputies. The two-party thing is
The appeal, if you will.
Yeah,
It's got
some.
Oh, it's next? All right.
Okay, just pull on the. Yep. Now, a couple of things that I have to now.
I'm here for
You're sure?
You know, it's been up other thing, for the town. I did not. No sound.
I know, but I want them to be ready when they get back.
Does she want to do her policy? Well.
When you're ready to talk. You know, she didn't tell me I had to talk. I thought you guys, like, she came last time, I was here with her and she spoke. They said they were gonna make a decision.
Of why she thinks she should be a hotel.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, that's fine.
So this is, she's referring for paralegal. I said they come right in for slot, but see. I mean, I think speak, but I was here last time when she was feeling why it should be a hotel. And then they said they'd give her a decision in 2 weeks, so this is the 2 weeks. So I thought that the trustees were coming back to tell us the decision.
No, but that's not what.
Any discussions since what they heard from Mr.
Where you can see.
So.
Yeah, sure.
Of why you feel like she submitted in her packet.
She didn't give me a packet or anything.
Oh, she didn't?
No.
Oh, we have that.
Yeah, I can put it
I
on.
asked her if she had anything. She said no.
She did, she submitted a packet.
It was just the agenda. Yeah.
You have that?
Sorry.
Oh, it's like a macaron with, or a coconut, what are they called?
This is what she put together. Let me print this out.
She's just gonna say what she said.
Yeah, essentially.
I didn't understand that. I just kind of thought they were all over to get back to us today.
No, I don't think it's a regular.
So I'll print this out, I'll read it over.
Okay, thanks.
And the party thing.
This is kind of interesting too.
And get back to it. So could I have a motion to modify the agenda, please, to rearrange our items 2 and 3 on general business?
I'll move to rearrange items 2 and 3 on the discussion agenda.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you. Any further discussion? I'll call for the vote. Sorry, trying to be quick here. Okay, 7-0. I didn't think we would have an issue with that. So we're hearing an appeal from about the property owned by Diane Johnson. So I'll turn it over to our presenters.
Well, I think we should do staff.
Do you want to do a staff report first? Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you. So we're talking about a property on High Street. It's 436 High Street. It's known as the Little Log Cabin. It's adjacent to the Stone Cup. Diane Johnson is the owner. She is not here tonight, but her representative is Karen Libin. Sorry, thank you. Karen Libin. So Diane had an accounting business in the Little Log Cabin for a while. She closed that accounting business, and there are a few other offices in there. She came in to talk about opportunities for that property, and we discussed different opportunities moving forward. She asked what was desired there, and we talked about different possibilities, retail, shops, or lodging. We didn't go into detail. When we discussed kind of a larger hotel at one point. We didn't get into detail on the process, but she left thinking that there were opportunities. She then went through and remodeled the place into a single room rental and submitted a business license. When the business license came in, it was for a single room kind of short-term rental, which did not look like a hotel or a motel. So the code compliance officer brought that to my desk, and then we called Diane and let her know that we did not think this fit the intent of the code as a hotel motel. We did this because it was a single room rental. It did not function like your typical hotel or motel would, with a lobby or other services. The code itself says a hotel motel is allowed in the commercial downtown, and it defines large hotels as over 75 and small hotels as under 75 units. And so I did mention this in our short-term rental discussion, that there was somebody that wanted to do a short-term rental in the commercial downtown, and I got feedback that wasn't a desired outcome. So we went and discussed the options with Dee, and Dee is just trying to figure out a way to either rent the place or sell the place. She's considering, she doesn't have a whole lot of opportunity currently to do much more with the property. And so our interpretation, both the code compliance, the building official, and mine, were that this does not look or feel like a hotel. So we said this does not function like a hotel, so it wouldn't be permitted. When Dee said, what can I do? There's a section of the code that allows the board to make an interpretation if it's similar in nature. And so I said you could submit an agenda request and petition the board. She asked all kinds of other options, and that's what she decided to do. The short-term rental ordinance does allow a short-term rental in the commercial downtown, but only when there's a public-facing business, like a service or retail. In this case, there wasn't room for one. I think Dia is talking about a kiosk or something out front that might serve as a public-facing business. There's also been some discussion of, trying to modify the current building and put maybe some smaller homes out back, but they wanted an interpretation of my interpretation of that this does not match a hotel motel definition.
Just a clarification, where was the 75 definition in the code? I didn't see that in the commercial downtown.
So that's in the definitions, and I think 161, 16.1.160.
Can you, when I get that. This is in the commercial downtown district, correct? The business?
Correct.
Okay. And that's in the first part of the code definitions?
So it's in definitions and
in the first section of the zoning code.
First section, okay.
Correct.
Thank you. I just couldn't find it.
And I have it in front of me if you'd like me to read off the definitions.
Sure.
So, hotel, motel, small means a building that contains at least 75 guest rooms or less that are intended and used for occupancy as a temporary abode for individuals who are lodged with or without meals.
Okay, other questions for staff? Trustee Roberts.
Would there be some really simple solution for a street-facing retail, like a Coke machine or something?
I wouldn't interpret that as a public-facing business, but it still wouldn't fit a hotel.
Okay. Right.
That was suggested as an ATM. It just didn't seem to fit what the intent was. But the board is free to interpret that.
So it seems a little confusing because Ms. Johnson intends to sell the property, is that right? Yeah. And so then is there a buyer that wants it to already be designated as a hotel?
Trustee Roberts, I think just so we have a clear record, if you want to ask questions of the applicant, we should probably do it upon their presentation.
Okay, yeah, well, I was kind of asking Paul, but then our guests were sort of responding, so just forgive my infamiliarity with the process. Can you answer that, or is that not appropriate?
Yes, that is the intent I heard from her.
That there is an intended buyer that would prefer...
There was interest.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
And would prefer that she sort of prepare the property for them so that they don't have to try to go through this process once they purchase it. Is that
That's my understanding. Right? They wanted an entitlement.
I see. This may not really be related, but can you maybe explain a little bit about where a line is crossed where a hotel is regulated by some other regulatory authority like the state, and
There is no state license. The health and safety and the building code regulates hotels.
there's no state or other, just the town of Lyons on any type of hotel.
The Department of Public Health does, and the fire code and the building code.
Department of Public Health.
Correct.
But for every lodging, every type of lodging.
That's my understanding.
Okay, and so in Lyons today, where does that apply? Is it at Wicasa? Is it at Aspen Leaf, Ferg's Inn?
I don't know the answer to that. I'd
Okay.
have to look into it.
Okay, okay, thank you. I mean, I would like to know, so that I think the board could be better informed if we did know that, but maybe it's not a priority right now.
Yeah, sanitary and structural regulations for hotels are regulated by CDPHE. So they do have standards for that.
Sure, but do any of our current businesses fall under that regulatory authority?
I would think so, yeah.
Aspen Leaf only?
I'm not sure as to, I would think Wicasa probably would and Aspen Leaf probably would. I'm not sure about short-term rentals. They probably technically do, but I don't know if it's actually enforced much against them.
And that's the health department's
Correct. That's the state
responsibility.
health department.
And it's their responsibility to do enforcement and to
Correct.
find out about who they need to enforce and all of that?
Correct.
Or do we have a responsibility there?
Well, I mean, if we had it in our code, we could have supplemental regulations.
But we
yes.
don't. Oh,
We
we
do
don't,
require a copy of their their
Well-
Department of Public Health
to be on,
license when we
okay.
give them their business license.
So then, in that case, then it
Offhand, he can look.
does exist, perhaps,
Oh, yeah. I know it exists for Aspen Leaf.
Uh-huh.
I'm not sure it exists anywhere else.
but perhaps it should.
Perhaps it should,
Okay, thank you.
except I don't think that Wicasa would meet fire or building code.
Right, right,
And
because it's,
I don't believe Ferg City does either.
Wicasa is technically a campsite.
right. Yes. But Ferg's Inn also is sometimes one. Okay, I'm just thinking about how this fits with anything else in town, because that's sort of part of our decision is to determine.
The Aspen Leaf is the only other.
Thank you.
Questions for staff, and then we'll let the applicant have an opportunity to present. Trustee Miller?
Yeah, it was my understanding that a hotel motel had to have certain, amenities and ADA accessibility and building codes, that sort of thing, in order to have the status of a hotel. Which I'm not sure that particular building would pass due to the age of it.
Determine hotel, all those requirements apply.
Amenity-wise, that's my interpretation is that they would need certain, like a lobby or some type of service. I know the building code would require ADA access, fire would require sprinklers.
Right.
So there's a substantial investment that would be made after this determination to bring it to code.
Yeah, the process is whether or not this facility is a hotel. And if it
Okay.
is a hotel, then all that
Then-
other stuff will be required, including ADA accessibility,
it.
fire requirements, et cetera.
Okay. Thanks.
So my question to the attorney is, our decision tonight somewhat is quasi judicial, correct? I mean, we have to read the code and apply the code.
Yeah, it's a weird appeal process because it basically all it asks is whether this use is similar to other types of uses in the code. It's not laid out as a public hearing process as other types of processes are laid out in the code. This one just simply asks, does this use fit with other types of uses should be regulated as such?
Okay. Thanks for clarifying. Okay. Other questions for staff? Trustee Roberts?
I'd just like to sort of clarify or expound on your question, is this really just a matter of us using our opinion, or is there a particular objective approach to this?
You should be interpreting the code essentially. See, is this, and I can read off the exact section if you'd like to help illuminate basically your duty here tonight. So the Board of Trustees shall have the authority to determine whether or not the use, and the use here is this particular single room hotel, can be reasonably interpreted to be similar in nature and degree to a permitted or allowed use, to therefore be categorized as permitted or allowed use in that district, so in the commercial downtown district. Unless the Board of Trustees makes a determination that the proposed use should be permitted or allowed, no use that is not expressly permitted or allowed in this chapter is permitted. And so the staff's interpretation is that this use is not permitted in the commercial downtown district because it doesn't qualify as a hotel. What you can do here today is your interpretation of the code as it exists, even in its given state, which is kind of very subjective in a lot of ways, is similar to a hotel and therefore should be allowed as a hotel. That's what we're determining here tonight.
So can you see why I might think this sounds like I'm being asked for my opinion?
I mean, you are more like,
okay.
In your opinion, does the code allow for this use to be a hotel?
And you don't really present any other objective and measurement besides what your position is.
Our position is based on that, what is considered a hotel in the code and the definition, but also in the building code, the fire code, doesn't line up with what's being proposed. And the zoning code itself has a section on interpretation and how it should be interpreted. It says where it is unclear or vague, it should be interpreted in the most restrictive manner possible. And so we think that also guides our decision making interpretation to say that this is not a hotel.
Mm-hmm. So I think your response, and tell me if this sounds wrong, I think your response is that for an objective analysis, we should use your analysis.
You're basically, your job is to figure out whether or not you agree with staff's interpretation, or you think that staff's interpretation is unsupported by the evidence
I
and
understand.
by the code.
I'm just asking a different question, but I think I understand.
Yeah.
Trustee Miller?
Does the remodeled building have a full kitchen in it?
I believe it does. Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't have a range oven. It's got a refrigerator, just kind of like
Yeah. And what may help is we can have the presentation by the applicant,
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
if there are still questions, you can still ask that after both presentations.
So I just have one question more for staff. Is there any other definition in our code besides the large and small definitions that you referred to earlier?
For hotels, no.
Okay, thank you.
What about the building code?
Oh, in the building code, there's a definition that defines this as high hazard occupancy, which means it's a short-term occupancy and requires sprinklers. And it requires a full design plan be submitted and other elements that I'd have to consult with a building official about. I don't know all of them off the top of my head.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we're going to go ahead and let our applicants have an opportunity to present to the board, and then we'll let the board ask any follow-up questions. We don't have a public hearing, correct? So after that, we'll deliberate. Okay, thanks.
Okay, well, my first thing to point out is it's not a, oh, sorry. I'm Karen Libben, and I'm here on behalf of Dee Johnson. And this is Mike Sakato. And we're both working with Dee to help her market the property.
Okay, my question was your capacity in relationship to Dee.
Yeah.
Is your realtor for
Yes,
her? Okay,
yes.
thank you.
So this property is not, as Paul had mentioned here, a one-room unit. It's actually 2 separate bedrooms and then a common area, which I think would serve well as could serve well as a reception area if it needed to be. There's a dining room, a living room, and then a pseudo kitchen like a lot of hotels have, which is really more of a coffee service area with a sink, a refrigerator, and that's it, and a table. And the idea here was that it was the start for a future buyer to buy it and then add on to it. It's got a double lot, and we think that we know from the setbacks and so forth that there's substantial space to add more units to it. And I think I've lived in Lyons since the late 80s. There's a real shortage of hotel motel places to stay. And this being right in town and right next to the Stone Cup, it's just in the heart of things. And it seems to be a really great use for it. So as a real estate broker, it's hard for us to market something if we can't tell somebody what they can do with it. And so Dee went ahead and got started on what she thought was a good start for the hotel motel. I think for some reason motel just seems more appropriate than hotel.
Yeah, there could never be 75 units.
Yeah, I know.
Or
You
more
know,
than-
and so there's no minimum in the code for number of units. And if she needs to make some changes in there to put locks on the bedroom doors or something to make them each their own separate hotel room, that would be easy to do.
Trustee Miller?
You want to see that?
Yeah. Are there other questions while she's reviewing that? Trustee Farrell?
I had a question about the kiosk, since that was in there. And where would the property owner be if something should be going wrong with the kiosk, or somebody would be needing some services perhaps in the night?
You know, I think just like Mike is actually a very experienced property manager. You know, she's going to have a property management company managing it so that if there's a problem on the kiosk, it probably rings a number, and Mike would jump out of bed and be there.
Maybe. No.
No, but it would be like that. It would just be a property management situation, and probably have limited check-in hours. We're not going to let people check in 24 hours a day.
Well, so
during business hours.
I did a little research on it, and I thought it was kind of interesting because the kiosk concept, the way I interpreted most of it was that you've got a hotel who has a desk and a lobby, but you've got kind of like your frequent flyer folks that use this hotel often, and they've got it down now. They go to the kiosk, they check in, they go to the room, and that's it. But you still maintain some sort of a reception. And one of the concerns actually that kind of came up in some of the readings that I did was, perhaps underage kids taking advantage of an opportunity of checking into a place, or maybe a less desirable guest, or some of those problems. And so since this isn't what would really be a traditional hotel, from a safety standpoint, that actually brought up kind of some concerns for me also.
I think, you can kind of limit that. I manage some VRBOs of my own, is that things are booked in advance. We're not planning on somebody showing up an hour before they want to check in, and people are checked out. I mean, you check, there's security checks that VRBO, Airbnb, all those companies do on people. Nobody underage is allowed to book in any of those. So I think, it would have to be run in a similar fashion.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That's my questions for now.
Trustee Miller, did you have another?
No.
Okay. How would you advertise, or how would she advertise the property?
Well, signage for sure, and I think a lot of it would just be local word of mouth. Now we're down to one newspaper, so the Redstone Review. Online. It's really signage. I mean, how do hotels in Boulder advertise or Longmont? It's online and it's signage.
Okay. Other questions? Okay, so not hearing any further, Trustee Miller, one question? Okay.
So I'm looking at the Boulder County Assessor's report, and it's saying that it's a, 10,000 square foot lot? So how many more units do you think could be fit on a 10,000 square foot lot?
Well, I've been working on
Theoretically.
some, housing in Boulder that they're saying 200 square feet minimum for a hotel room or a unit.
Okay.
So the setbacks are minimal here, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you could fit a lot of units if they were all attached and little. But
Sure.
I'm not sure that would be the ideal because
Right.
the profile of people that come to visit Lyons have kids, and you might want something bigger, like a 400 or 500 square foot unit where there's adjoining bedrooms that families could rent. So maybe just 4 more units attached to it that would be similar size.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem, go ahead.
I don't have a question, I have a comment.
Sure, yeah.
The PCDC, the Planning Commission, spent quite a bit of time looking at a question that's very similar to this, and that is having vacation rentals in the downtown commercial area. And in that discussion, it was very important to the Planning Commission that we don't end up having lots and lots of buildings that are, there's a door and something inside that people can't go in and out that isn't open to the public. And so one of the things I think that the PCDC did not want to do is establish a precedent that could possibly end up limiting the number of retail spaces that are available, retail, education, service, and that sort of thing, that where people would be walking down the street and be able to go in and out. It strikes me that there are alternatives that could be taken with this property to make it compliant with that set of regulations much more easily than to establish it as a hotel. And I'm kind of relying on that notion of that if it's vague or ambiguous, that we would need to look at the most restrictive and strictest interpretation.
Other comments? Trustee Browning?
As the staff has articulated, our standard for decision here is whether the requested use can be reasonably interpreted to be similar in nature and degree to a permitted or allowed use. Well, hotels and motels, small hotels and motels are permitted or allowed uses in downtown Lyons. We have 2 of them nearby. Now we have 3 short-term rentals in commercial buildings nearby. So it seems to me that standard is clearly met. Can the use be reasonably interpreted to be similar in nature and degree? It's lodging, just like 5 other lodging areas there, and in degree it's actually less in degree than some of the other hotels. There actually is another reference in the Lyons Municipal Code to hotels. It's in the Utilities Code in the definition of what a unit is, and it references a unit as intended as a single living or sleeping area, which this building currently is. This is a small motel, single booking party motel. That's what it's proposed. It would produce direct sales tax and lodging tax from the operation of the business itself. It would produce indirect sales tax when guests at this downtown facility go to nearby stores and restaurants. I think it's better for the town than having an accounting office there which produces no sales or lodging tax, and certainly better than yet another vacant space in downtown. And I appreciate the PCDC's concern about buildings you can walk into, but there are a lot of them right now you can't walk into because they're vacant. This one would be not only would be usable and bring people downtown. A lot of references here to things about short-term vacation rentals. The purpose of that ordinance was really to avoid converting what could be long-term residential rental space to short-term vacation rentals, and I don't think that's an issue with this commercial zone property that's been used as a business for many, many years. I don't believe it would ever be used as a long-term residence. I think there's adequate parking. I think it'll have little or no adverse effect on any nearby residential area. And so I'm in favor of it.
So I'll share my thoughts. I kind of come at this looking at what does the code actually say. And by the definitions in our code, I would agree there's no minimum. And I'll tell you, when I travel, I never stop at a front desk. I check in on my phone before I ever get there. Occasionally, I might stop at the desk for a bottle of water or something, but my goal is to walk in and walk out and not have to deal with the front desk if I don't have to. I think that it's very different from our typical vision of a hotel, but I think all of this is all changing. And I absolutely agree. I think it's better to have things being used in town and have people here, and I would rather have this in the commercial district than in a residential area. And so I agree with the PCDC's concerns about how much of this would we want to allow to go on, but I think we can manage that on Main Street. I think almost every property is unique, and you have to look at every individual property and say, does this make sense for that property and where it is and how it's currently built? And I think it would be great if they expanded on that and had some lodging right in downtown. What people want to do is walk. And I think you're going to be limited based on parking about how much you could ever do there. So I don't think it would ever get out of control. I think you would have a couple of units. I do think you're going to find that even if you're successful tonight, you're going to be somewhat constrained potentially by building code. And so there's going to be, with that designation, is going to come cost to take care of the life safety kind of issues and sprinklers, and what expense you'll run into, I have no idea. So I'm not sure this is the ultimate hurdle to success, but that's a business, owner's issue to deal with. So I am supportive of your appeal.
Mayor Sullivan, if I
Yeah.
may, we want to make one clarification. There is an additional definition of hotel and motel, and the code is in the utility section. It's in section 13.110. And it's defined as a hotel or motel means a building for occupancy as a temporary abiding place of individuals who are lodged with or without meals, in which there are 6 or more guest rooms, in which there are no provisions are made for cooking an individual room or suite. It's not in the zoning code, it is in the utility code, but it's one more of the scattered definitions of hotels. There's other types of lodging facilities defined there. There's a definition for a boarding house, definition for a lodging house. All of them require multiple rooms, 5, 4, or in the case of a hotel, 6.
That's helpful. I guess my response to that is, to me, I still want to apply the zoning code, just because that's what the code that dictates the use. So, I think it could grow into more units where it would comply with that, but I don't know if that totally changes my mind. Trustee Roberts?
I just wonder if there's some avenue by which we could ask the new property owner to come into compliance as time goes down the road, kind of like we've done with River Bend for a number of years. And I have a hunch that things might change in the near future too. Like maybe it's used for a short-term rental for a while, and something else, some other opportunity arises that's more interesting. I feel uncomfortable sort of making ad hoc exceptions, and I also agree very much with Trustee Browning and Mayor Sullivan that I'd rather see something in a building rather than be vacant. I'd rather see short-term lodging in the commercial zone instead of in the residential zone, which I think is also sort of a ad hoc change to our zoning in between long-term planning cycles. It's kind of it's got me stumped as to what's most important to me so far. Are we deliberating now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we sort of just fell into that mode, didn't we? Okay, well, that was stated my position at the moment.
Okay, Town Administrator.
When I first heard about this, I tended to follow the original thought that I'm hearing Trustee Browning and the mayor express about a hotel doesn't have a limit on the minimum number of rooms. However, as I have studied this further, and as Ms. Libben just said herself, this is going to run like a VRBO, not like a hotel. To me, I can't differentiate between this being a short-term rental and a hotel. I think it's really more of a short-term rental. And we have an ordinance you just passed 2 weeks ago that said no short-term rentals as the frontage in our downtown commercial zone. So I firmly believe with the staff that what would prevent any other business on Main Street from taking their main front floor and saying, okay, now it's a hotel, if you pass this. And I think it's setting a really dangerous precedent. I think it's fine in the back of something, just like you just passed, but you just passed a code 2 weeks ago that said this was not allowed.
I understand that, but they're in a window of time where that code is not yet effective. And I think we have to somewhat apply.
There's a rule about pending legislation.
So we can apply a
We
code that's
could
no
enforce
longer
it.
effective?
Yeah.
I mean, that's your spirit of
Okay.
what you just passed.
Trustee Miller?
And I can just add to that, I mean,
Every empty storefront could become a hotel.
the appeal language is vague about what exactly the effect of this appeal is. It just talks about the use being allowed. So someone can make an argument that, well, if this use is allowed and my similar use is and also a two-room hotel, that other two-room hotels would also be permitted pursuant to the appeal, which is really on the use and not the individual property. If that makes sense.
Yep.
But, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Miller?
I'm going to have to agree with Victoria on this. I completely see that point, and I don't think that I feel like if the person that buys this place wants to make it into a hotel, a motel, they can absolutely do that. But to do that prior to selling it is doesn't make any sense for us to make this exception and have everybody else potentially follow suit with their empty vacant lot buildings downtown. I think that's completely dangerous. So that's where I stand.
Good. Mayor Pro Tem?
Yeah, I'm very much in favor of there being more places in town for people to stay overnight. I love that idea. I think it's excellent. I totally agree with that part of it. But I also think that we, as town administrator said, we just passed an ordinance that enables this with a relative, it's not an extraordinarily burdensome requirement that there be some level of retail public access. In my mind, there is a way to enable this without creating a precedent that was just described by the town administrator. Thanks.
Trustee Caravas?
I was looking at this kind of like the mayor and Trustee Brown, kind of both ways on the open storefronts, but I still revert back to when I first read it. Looks like a duck, acts like a duck, walks like a duck, it's a duck. It's a short-term rental.
Mm-hmm.
Just looking at it right now, it's a short-term rental. Like the staff said, we just passed an ordinance that we're trying to stay away from that frontage. Now, if they change something to the frontage and there's something else there that it meets it, that's fine. Also, as I looked at it, people that have vision will buy property and develop it into a motel, come to our permitting, come to our town planner and say, all right, what steps do I need? Let's do this. So like, I'm at the point that I can't vote for this at this time. because it's a short-term rental.
Is there an official definition of a short-term vacation rental?
There is, and I had it pulled up. I'm trying to make sure I didn't close out of it. Six 1080 is there.
Sort of the vision. Yeah.
61160. Yeah, it is. It's in there.
Well, we talked about that.
Sure, I can read it off. It's a bit of a long one. It's in 161160. Short.
Be shortly modified by our new.
It'll be modified by our one that's coming, but only slightly. Short-term rental means the use of any dwelling unit, or portion of any dwelling unit that is located in the A1, A2, E, EC, R1, R2, C, CD, and CEC zone districts that is rented or leased to no more than one booking party per night for valuable consideration for individual occupancy periods for less than 30 days, with or without provision of meals. This definition does not include commercial hotels or motels. A short-term rental is a use as accessory to the primary residential use of a dwelling unit, for which the principal use remains occupancy to the owner as their primary residence. As such, the short-term rental use must remain incidental and subordinate to the primary use of the dwelling as a permanent residence. And of course, that's being modified by the existing ordinance, which allows there to be a business with a frontage business with an accessory short-term rental use.
Is that brochure, are you currently advertising as a motel or a short-term vacation?
We thought the hotel motel was what fitted in the commercial district. And it's interesting because the tiny homes, I was here a couple of weeks ago when that guy did the presentation on that. I mean, how would that work? You would still need, does Wicasa have a reception area? So you'd have
Just a
to,
little area you check in.
and is a person in there 24 hours a day, or
I don't know if they're there 24 hours a day, but
they're on call? So,
they have a check-in area. It's a campground.
Trustee Roberts.
Is there any reason why this couldn't be used as just a rental home?
Yes, you can't have a primary rental home in commercial downtown. So because if it was a home prior to commercial downtown, and now it had only been discontinued for less than 6 months at a time, it would be allowed to continue. But currently, because it was used as an office, and it was changed to that use.
Restaurant before, yeah.
It can't be switched back.
Mm-hmm. Do we enforce that? I'm just curious,
Yes.
Okay.
We do.
If the use has changed.
We are enforcing no residential use on the commercial downtown district.
If a use has changed for over 6 months from resident out of that.
You're talking about the bank building?
Mm-hmm.
If it's a
He
prime.
has an art gallery open so many
He has
days
an
a
art
month.
gallery.
But there are homes in the commercial district
Yeah.
also, but
There
of course,
are.
but they haven't turned over to
They
business,
can
I
be
understand.
secondary use.
Yeah, we fixed
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, this is where it seems the worst, is that what sells in Lyons is a house to live in. And what we want is homes for people to live in. And it's a house.
yeah.
And I'm not directing frustration at you, Paul. It's just frustrating that we have this impediment to solving some tiny piece of our housing problem because it's in the commercial zone and hasn't been lived in since, well, before Marguerite was making pies there.
Yeah.
And So, thanks for answering that.
Sure.
I don't think it meets that definition either,
The definition of what?
short-term rental.
Well, it doesn't meet that definition, but our new definition includes, in commercial districts, C, EC, CD, and C, a short-term rental is also used as an accessory to the primary business use of the property. So there's no primary business use, for which the principal use remains business open to the public on the same property. So it doesn't meet the short-term rental definition either.
Did this property get all the building permits they needed to make these changes without our
They
knowledge?
said, yes, they said they didn't need them because they were just internal, kind of minor
It was already there. It was 2 bedrooms and a bathroom and a living room, and it was a house at one time.
Well, at one time, but it was a restaurant after.
Yeah, it's amazing that those women made pies out of what the kitchen is, because it's not really a kitchen. It's got a sink.
At some point, there was a change in use that wasn't included, obviously.
So I think trustee Browning and then trustee Farrell, we really haven't heard from yet. We'll go in that
I was
order.
waiting till everybody commented, so.
Good. Let's go to trustee
Okay,
Farrell since we haven't
I just
heard
wanted to
from
respond to a couple of comments, and I'll
Go
be
ahead,
short.
and then we'll-
I want to explain the reasons for my vote in light of some subsequent comments about what we just passed 2 weeks ago and the short-term vacation rental ordinance. The reason for the short-term vacation rental ordinance as it applied to residences to require a primary residence and a subsidiary short-term residence, short-term vacation rentals use, was so that the property would be kept up, the conditions would be made good, and the reasoning was someone who owned who's had their primary residence there would obviously take care of the property. Ditto for the short-term vacation rentals in commercial areas. If it's your business, you're going to keep up the building, you're going to make sure the air conditioning and heating work and so forth. That's understandable for short-term rentals. This is really not a short-term rental. It doesn't fit the definition of short-term vacation rental. It's really a small motel. And we don't require upfront business for the Aspen Leaf or Ferg's Inn, because if a hotel is kept in shoddy condition, then it's not going to get guests. It's going to get poor reviews online. So I don't think that the reasoning underlying either the residential or the commercial frontage business for short-term vacation rentals applies when you have a small motel, really, because I don't think there's an issue with it being kept up to standard, because if it's not, people won't stay there.
Trustee Farrell.
So I just want to applaud the creativity and the innovation of coming up with this vision. I do, though, think that we're really dealing with a square peg, trying to fit it into a round hole at this moment. I think there's probably some things that you could come back with some changes that then would make this work. But I just don't feel that currently I can vote for this at this time. That's not to say I wouldn't encourage you to keep tweaking and working on it so that it can fit nicely. But at this point, I just don't think, based on, what the administrator has said, and I do think that what we just passed is very valid, and I don't want to see us massaging that just yet. I do think that the utility code, even though that does seem like it should be in our other zone language, actually, I just don't feel like this is there yet. So, but I wouldn't say don't keep trying to find a few tweaks and make it work.
So there's a lot of good discussion. This is a tough one. I think hearing all the different points of view, I think a lot of really good points have been made. And I think you could find pretty reasonably on either side of it, quite honestly. I think I still come down on the side of, while the PCDC's intentions are good, I don't know that there's a retail business for everybody who wants to potentially subsidize. I think the reason for allowing short-term rentals in commercial, one, I think they're better there than in residential areas, but two, it will offset the investment of trying to get some retail going and hopefully lowering the barriers to opening a business by lowering the rent. But I don't know that every every property is conducive to that model. I think we have a lot of them that I'm hoping they'll add second stories. It'll, hopefully some of them will even do long-term residential and not short-term, because I think it's a tough business model. I mean, I've had rental properties in the past, and it's not an easy thing to manage. And I don't think the line is as clear between a motel and a short-term vacation rental as we'd like to think it is. Right. I think the lines have blurred a ton. Rental property is rental property, bless you, whether it's big multi-unit and Hilton Garden Inn versus a VRBO, the experience is almost the same anymore between the two. So I don't know that I think the distinction is as clear as maybe some of us who've been around a while think it is. I think to younger folks, this is more normal than going and staying in a big box hotel. We need things happening in our town, and I think while the new ordinance will do a good job, I think, of incentivizing new models, I don't see why we should stand in the way of someone trying to bring lodging to the town, even though it's unconventional. It's an unconventional property that's been used in unconventional ways for many, many, many years. And that's one of the good things about Lions, is that there's unexpected things in places, and I think that adds character. I don't think it's ideal. I think you'll have to figure out if you can meet the safety codes that are required with that designation.
Right.
But either way, I don't think that's our problem to solve. So I'm going by the code that we have today, and 2 weeks from now or whenever the new one goes into place, we could require that, but I'm willing to let this go. So that's where I'm saying.
Can I ask one more question?
Yep.
Just, Ms. Levin, are you considering 2 booking parties at any time or just one?
It could be 2 booking parties, yes.
Okay, so, and then have you guys checked into what it requires to be a motel? I mean, do you know what it's going to take to do that?
As far as the fire code, you mean, and
Well, and just
health and
whatever, yeah,
safety?
whatever they.
I haven't personally. I know D. Johnson's started on that process.
Okay, I just wondered if it's even possible to get it issued as a motel by the state, and if not, then.
I thought the state didn't have they don't do the license. It's the town
Well,
of
but
Lyons.
Department of Public Health and
Okay.
Fire and everyone else, but we don't know yet if it's going to pass those.
No, and it's been a building there for a long time, so I'm not sure if it's ever passed those codes for any use. If they're stricter for hotel motel than they are
Okay, so
for
then if we
offices.
classify it as a motel and they don't, then
What-
we'll be back.
We will still need to issue a certificate of occupancy if
And a
this
business
use
license.
is
Agreed.
approved, which would
Yep.
require the ADA compatibility and also a fire sign off.
Yep.
And so you could not issue that CO without those 2 items.
Okay.
Yep. All right, is there any motion for this issue? Trustee Brown,
I move we grant the appeal.
is there a second? I'll second it, so we can have a vote. All right, any further discussion? All right, I'll call for the vote. So it looks like it fails 2-5. Sorry, thank you for the effort you're putting in, and we hope that the new owners will still consider what they can do to utilize that property for a commercial business. Thank you. All right, next item on the agenda is the fire tap question. A lot of fun ones tonight. Fire tap for Apple Valley Road, so turn it over to staff.
Thank you, guys. Keep working with them. Get your motel license.
So we've been getting these requests from Apple Valley Road for the fire taps. Recommended actions would be for you to approve the procedure for handling of fire taps on Apple Valley Road that would receive water from the town needing a fire suppression tap. Properties on Apple Valley Road, when required by Boulder County or Lyons Fire Protection District to sprinkler their home, may request from the town of Lyons a fire tap. Property owners who already have been serviced by the town with a 3/4-inch tap would not pay the upgrade to a 1-inch tap. Aaron with UEB wanted me to make sure that I kind of corrected that next sentence there and saying, properties currently using Lyons water when required by Boulder or Lyons Fire Protection to install a residential fire suppression system may request from the town to enlarge from the 3/4 to a 1 inch. Aaron and I are going to get together tomorrow and come up with sort of a little checklist with this of what needs to be checked off with as far as getting permits even though Boulder County requires them to get a permit first, they don't have to get a permit with Lyons, but since they're going to use tap into our system, we're going to require it to make sure that that tapping is done right and that the bedding is done right. So there's going to be steps that they have to follow in order to get this. And I talked to Longmont. Longmont won't charge us for the upsized tap like they charge for every tap that we have now. It'll be the same. They suggest that we either a $5 to $10 or whatever we decide extra a month besides that base rate for the fire tap. Whether it's a 1-year charge or add to the $29.10 base rate already. But they said that they suggested that with maintenance and taking care of that stuff, that be something that we might want to look at. It's probably going to come to the fact that Lyons Fire is going to be asking for these in town too. And that was the other thing that Aaron wants to look at too. I do too, right here. Lyons Fire is going to start requiring this of new built homes, it sounds like. But I think that
Yeah, we accepted that out of the fire code as a requirement.
so he can't make us
So
do
he
that
can't.
yet. He can recommend it, and so at some point it might be a possibility, but not now.
Sorry, you've lost me completely about what they're trying. Could you say that again? Just start over.
So I think what's the fire department is requesting, and they've already done it in outside of Lyons, is that there be fire suppression systems in-house in new development. And if you remember right, we passed the fire code right when I first got here.
Yeah.
Where this was an issue, we decided we weren't going to require sprinklers. We exempted this out.
Right.
But it's certainly the wish of the fire department for sometime in the future to require this. These are for Apple Valley homes. They're not in the town. He can require it there.
He can.
Correct.
He can.
Yeah.
Because it's Boulder County.
Correct.
And it's their code versus our code.
Correct.
And they require it.
But Apple Valley's on town water for historical reasons, so we're trying to deal with how do you connect those systems.
Gotcha, thank you.
So I think our discussion last time, though, was to have staff bring us a recommendation. So can you just clarify what the recommendation
She went
is?
through it, yeah. The recommendation is to allow anyone on Apple Valley only, not beyond that at this point, to upgrade to a 1-inch tap to meet both their housing, residential requirements and the sprinkler requirements, with a small increase in their base fee for the fire tap maintenance.
And the only thing I would add to that would be, it's for the people who already have a Lyons tap.
Yes, not anyone new.
Anyone new would have to come to the board, request to be hooked up.
To our water.
They would have to pay the 17.5 water tap, and they would also have to buy a CBT share of water.
Well, pursuant to the town code, because there may
Right.
be issues whether they can even request to do so.
Right now, they can't.
Yeah.
Can you say it again, what new residents would have to do? They would have to come to the board.
Well, they're not,
Currently under the code, they're not. We'd have to change the code. Currently, they're not permitted.
So we can't do it for somebody, so how can we do it for this new residence?
this is, the one that's in front of us right now is one that was destroyed by the flood. They already had a 3/4 inch
So you're
tap and we're hooked.
basically
to our
whoever
water.
already has a tap,
And
not
now that we're
necessarily a new
rebuilt
build.
and they're required to put in sprinkler.
Got it, okay. So it's not about whether it's a new residence, it's about whether the property already
I
had a tap.
shouldn't have said that, new residence.
It's whether or not it currently has a tap.
Okay. Trustee Carabas.
And the UEB was in agreement that this individual or future individuals that fit this mode or fit this model, at their expense, put a meter on it, on the 1-inch tap,
Mhm.
and that it,
Charge them extra.
yep, well, but if Longmont says charge them amount, that takes care of us checking it once a year to make sure it's not moved. And they haven't gotten into the discussion yet, but that if that meter does move without permission, that there needs to be fines, teeth, sharp teeth.
But the meter that they're gonna put on at the 1-inch line will actually, move every month, because it's gonna be taking the water that they're actually using in their house too. What we'll watch on that is, like we do with everybody else in town, is if, what is it, 270,000 gallons a year, if you go over that, you're gonna get charged big time. There is that, we watch that with the utility bills. And if you hit that, water's gonna be very expensive for you for the rest
But
of the
they're
year.
gonna have 2 meters, one for the 3/4-inch tap, one
No,
for.
just one.
The 3/4 coming out, we're just putting in a 1, is my
Yeah, we're
understanding.
gonna go with we can do it with just one, and that's what Longmont suggested. They said, you do not wanna have the 2 taps there, you wanna go with one. You upgrade them to a 1-inch tap, you put a meter on that 1-inch tap, and, you just have to, like, that gets read every month. So if they go over, they're gonna play big bucks.
Don't they already pay?
Trustee Browning.
Yeah, they pay more for water right now anyway
Yeah.
than, in-town customer.
Thank you.
So I want to make clear, the $5 or $10 base fee amount that would be added, that's intended to compensate the town for its costs of both the initial inspection of the installation of this and periodic inspections in the future. Wasn't clear what that was going toward.
It's more of an ongoing maintenance type thing, but the homeowner is going to pay for all of that. They'll pay for the meter, the installation, the tap, everything, from our line clear into their house. They'll pay for it.
So
Town's
Deb-
not paying for it.
So Deb, is it clear to say the capital costs are paid for by the resident, and then the ongoing maintenance costs, the operating costs are paid by this increase in the
Yes.
base fee? Okay.
So, but when they put in there, when they initially put it in, the town's going to have to go send somebody out to inspect to make sure it was done right, correct?
That's going to be included in the building permit that they get for us,
So
that
the
they will be paying for that.
building permit fee will cover the town, is
Yes.
intended to cover the town's cost. And so the $5 to $10 is really intended to cover periodic.
Ongoing maintenance of the line.
And so when we have to inspect it, when the town has to periodically inspect it, is the idea?
Not really periodically inspected.
why?
It's just part of being the system development fee.
Okay.
Right now, we have it set, your base fee is set as a
Right.
3/4 inch, and at a 1-inch, there's potential for bigger
Okay.
issues.
Yeah. Yeah, I was at the UEB meeting that Trustee Caravas referred to, and the UEB seemed to be very insistent on separately metering the 1-inch tap, in particular to check for leaks, if it ever leaks.
And then UEB is going to hear this again more when they meet this week, is it?
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
This is my trustee report.
Um, Some of this stuff has come up in between when they met and now.
But Chair Kaplan's been involved with these discussions and is supportive in recommending this new approach.
With the 1-inch.
Seems to me, though, but it seems like somebody with a 1-inch tap is going to be able to use a lot more water, up to 270,000 gallons here, which is a lot of water.
That's a 3/4. 3/4 is 270,
Okay,
not a
so,
1-inch. 1-inch is.
so we'll be monitoring it through the monthly billing, and if they exceed the amount that they'd be allowed under a 3/4-inch tap, they'll get billed extra.
And we always have a couple people a year, believe it or not, who exceed that because of irrigation or leaks.
Or fountains or something in their yard.
They
do go over it.
So we'll be able to monitor if their use exceeds the amount they could use
yeah.
under a 3/4-inch
For a
tap.
3/4 inch.
Okay.
All right, is there a motion to accept staff's recommendation?
So moved.
For a second.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All right, I'll call for the vote. And it passes 7-0.
Attorney Dittman and I were talking about, this was a request by an individual, but we're wondering if we need to bring forward an ordinance to memorialize this discussion and, or some form of a policy.
I think it would be good to bring forward something that kind of, because this is a little confusing, and I'm not sure these minutes will suffice when someone down the line tries to.
Yeah, and this was the first time I've seen this, but I think I would recommend an ordinance changing the code to permit this type of
I would say as
installation.
long as it doesn't hold up, because it sounds like they need to continue.
Well,
I
we're
think we
getting
can-
ready to
yeah.
put the lines in Apple Valley right now, so they needed that
Okay.
direction.
So the utilities code allows a lot of discretion to the utilities director to make these kind of decisions. So I think, we can kind of proceed under that discretion allowed pursuant to the code. But moving forward, there's going to be other properties in Apple Valley that are going to need this in the future potentially.
Yeah.
And so therefore we should probably put this in code.
Okay, is the board good with that? Yes. Okay, thank you.
So you can't go on vacation because then we can step in and you're not.
Yeah, I can never go on vacation. That's the solution.
Okay, well, we did not have any items removed from consent, so we're at trustee reports. Started that in since trustee Roberts stepped out. You want to go first, trustee Roberts?
The SFC has not met since our last meeting, so I've got nothing to report in that respect. I do have a agenda request to follow up on something that Trustee Drystat raised in the last meeting, which is, I think it's important that the board move quickly to set some policies for when Lake McIntosh shares may be acceptable for residential or commercial development in the town. There's some issues that need attention, such as if we accept those shares are subject to annual assessments. The assessment this year was $40 a share for pipeline improvements for Lake McIntosh water. If we accept shares, is the town going to pay those annual assessments, or the developer who may have put up the shares years ago? We need to look at issues that arise from the fact that even though the city of Longmont owns the majority of shares in Lake McIntosh, the actual water operations are managed by our good friends at the Highland Ditch Company. We need to look at whether a code change is needed to accept these shares, or whether the Longmont Reservoir Company is an irrigation company, which we can accept for. We need to look at silting issues about Lake McIntosh. We need to look at who approves the use of Lake McIntosh shares. Is it the BOT in every case? Does the staff have discretion? How is a developer to know when he or she is investigating a potential property if he's going to be allowed to use Lake McIntosh shares instead of CBT shares? Does the developer have to roll the dice and take their chances at the end of the process to see if BOT says yes or no? It's going to stifle development if there's not some type of predictability or policy. So I think we need to move fairly quickly before we start getting hit with project by project requests to use these, and set a policy. And so I'd like to have at least a board discussion on that, if not a workshop.
Yeah, and I think we kind of already said we wanted to work on the policy, so I think it's a matter of getting some proposals and thoughts to start us off.
Trustee Browning, would you mind sending us that list you had so we could prepare for a workshop?
I was just going to ask.
Okay.
One thing we were saying about the assessment per share, $40 a year, we have an assessment from CBT every year as well.
Trustee Miller?
Okay, so Housing and Human Services next meeting is September 10th at 3:30. And the last meeting, the update that I have is, let's see, that we're very close to figuring out the voucher system for the $25,000. That is it 25,000 or 20? I think it's 25,000.
We will have that confirmed next week when we have the county representative.
Okay. Okay, it's for Boulder County Transportation So we can use those, start using those funds as voucher programs. So that's very exciting to have some transportation for people that don't have it. That's been a long time coming. We've been working on that for years. And then the 9 Health Fair is September 28th. Is that right? September 28th at the high school. That's all I've got. 28, right? Yeah.
You already heard mine? No. UAB meets tomorrow. The discussion of some things Mark had brought up just now was also discussed on the UAB briefly. Last ecology board meeting, there's great concern about the ponds and things growing in it they didn't want there and what the solutions were. And Dave Cosgrove from staff was there, kept everybody calm and happy. So kudos to Steph. Make sure he gets big kudos from all you guys. That he filled in a lot of questions and a lot of things thrown at him, and he handled like a pro and took care of it all. And it sounded like they're looking into several different issues. So it's.
One of the forerunners is carp.
Yep. Because water, aeration and water.
It's grass carp, just to be clear.
Sterilized.
Sterilized, yeah. Grass carp.
So who does that, by the way? Who's that doctor? Because aeration is one of the better ones, but aerating a pond is very expensive. So there was Dave is looking at what's that?
Just need a fountain?
Yeah, but aeration, but pumps and keep it clean. And
We're
it's
trying to find solar because we don't have electric.
yeah, and then there are some municipalities that have used those for temporary. It's like a situation like this that have just put theirs in storage. So Dave and some of the members of the board kind of look at those jurisdictions to see if they're going to. We could borrow it, rent it, something short term, but so there you go.
Trustee Roberts?
The Economic Vitality Commission met, I think, almost 2 weeks ago, and staff, Tiffany Martindale, is devoting some effort to orient the new members to the Main Street program as the work plan document becomes final. So that's a good part of the efforts in those meetings so far, in my experience. There was some discussion of hotel feasibility study, and did pardon?
The RFP went out.
Okay, did Kim already send an email? No. She sent the EBC members an email with some information she got from Mr. Paul Tambrello, and he wrote that banks need a feasibility study in order to loan the money for a project of this size and scope. The data helps to prove if it is viable and worth loaning funds. He noted it is similar to future value appraisal. The banks will also want to know about absorption, what has been built recently in Longmont, Estes Park, Boulder, and is there enough demand in the off-season? So, as Town Administrator Simons had stated, there's a RFP for performing this study, and it's been budgeted, and I think there was some discussion about whether there was enough budgeted for what it's going to cost. So I suppose we'll hear about that soon. Was that your impression?
Yeah.
Okay. And then there's some discussion about 446 Main Street lot, and there was some discussion about perhaps a creative approach for the future of that property. If there was some way to sever the utility connections and water tap, or particularly the water share from that property, to be sold to some other development elsewhere, would that offset the cost for someone to purchase that lot to be used in some way that doesn't require utility connection, such as a parking lot, outdoor market, a place for a big chair. So there was just discussion of that. I don't know how that goes anywhere, but I thought I would mention it. And there's, I think we're close to the completion of the market analysis and opportunity assessment that's developed by RPI Consulting. Has anyone seen that document so far? I mean, I have a draft that's, I think, pretty close to done, or maybe we could probably pass that around, or should we wait till let Kim do that?
Wait till
Yeah.
they sign off on it.
Well, anyway, I thought,
Yeah.
like, I've given scant detail in past meetings. I thought maybe I should step up a little bit. The EDC seems concerned that there's been very little interest in borrowing from the revolving loan fund, and like to get the message out to anybody who might be interested in borrowing some money that there is money available to borrow. And it seemed like members felt it's sort of curious that there's reluctance, or maybe there's a feeling that it's too much work. It's a lot of work goes into the application, but I think there's a threshold that we're past for how much effort it requires for borrowers, because the first round of borrowing and payback has occurred, so the money is under the purview of the RLF instead of an initial grant from a federal agency. Does that sound accurate also? Thank you. And membership, we're still shy 2 members, and the most recent appointee, Jay Scott's got a new job, and his schedule is upside down from what it was, so they're still working on finding a
I
good
have
time to
one
meet.
for you. I'm just waiting on an application.
Okay.
Yeah. Chris Winya.
Oh, I was just going to.
Yeah, you were going to bring that up. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry, I should have given you credit for that.
Not at
Jocelyn
all.
found that person, but
Yeah.
I'm ready and waiting to appoint him when he sends an application over.
You talked to him?
Not yet, no.
That's all. Thank you.
Thanks.
So I guess that was actually going to be one of my questions, is should I ask him to get in touch with you?
You
or-
just go online and fill out the application. It
I'll let
comes
him know.
automatically to me.
Okay, okay, I can let him know that. So a couple things. I wanted to know, I got a call from, I don't have her name written down, but I think she's the president of Save Our South St. Vrain. And just, I know at one point we talked about, excuse me? Amanda, thank you. About potentially having a workshop of them coming in. In the meantime, so I kind of would just like to raise that again, if we happen to have a spare spot. But in the meantime, they are hosting a farm-to-table dinner at the Farmette tomorrow, the 4th. And so if you're interested in hearing anything about that, they'll have some really good information there. And in addition, the Lions Arts and Humanities Commission will be hosting a Lions Farmette dinner on September the 18th. It currently says that it's sold out online, which is awesome, except that I have a feeling that might mean it's too late to buy a ticket online. So if you're really interested, call the Farmette directly. But any proceeds from the wine and beer will benefit our arts and culture locally. And Black Belly will be the restaurant serving up food there. I have not heard any specific numbers about how the arts at the Riverbend went on Sunday, but last week. But my impression is from word of mouth is that it was great. And oh, okay. Yeah, I think that it was a really successful year from what I'm hearing. I was not able to attend, and that's all I have for now.
Mayor Pro-Tem.
I wasn't able to attend the PCDC meeting due to a special meeting of the board and the lure meeting. So, and I actually have not followed up to find out what happened. So that's all.
All right, so our student commission had their first meeting, and we had everybody was here. I think I put some pictures out there on Facebook. They did an amazing job. I was so impressed with them. I think they passed no less than 30 motions. Once they got rolling and got the hang of it, there was, they were all business. They did discuss whether the town should consider some restrictions on vaping products. And they decided they needed to do more research, so they tabled that discussion to come back. But they did come up with a couple good action items to go to the elementary school and try to talk to fifth graders before they go to sixth grade, because they feel like that's when you are most likely to pick it up, and they're going to talk to Mr. Moore. And, so they have a plan, and they have, they're very engaged. And I thought, if you want to come and really be inspired, come watch these guys, because they really were very thoughtful and did a really good job. So I think they're embracing the format. We're treating them kind of more officially, and they had a table also at back to school night to recruit more students. And actually, I have one application for a non-voting member that I'd like to go ahead and appoint, and her name is Chloe Ells. So they're recruiting their bench so that when seniors move on, there'll be some that are participating as non-voting members that can step into that seat. So overall, it was just a really fun, successful meeting. So their next meeting will actually be Sunday, September 8th. The meeting could bounce around a little bit until the fall sports are over. So we're juggling calendars a little bit. 7 p.m. And then in fact, they asked, could we broadcast the meetings? We'll take one step at a time. They were like, so are the cameras on? Are we ready? I was like, all right. The only other thing that happened was the sub-regional group for the Dr. Cog tip cycle did meet. I was not able to attend their meeting. It was during a workday last week, but no decisions were being made. It was more to just touch base and talk about some kind of loose end kind of items about how things are going to go once this gets going a little bit further along. So other than that, I don't think, the only other things I had is we had some outstanding items that I don't know if staff have had a chance to work on these, but the shooting range letter to Boulder County and the senator letters that we had talked about the quarry. I just want to make sure they don't completely fall off our radar. We do get flurries of emails about the shooting range from time to time, so people are clearly talking about it at HOA meetings or something. I'm not sure what's sparking that, but it's still on people's minds. So I just want to make sure we follow up on what we did decide to do. And that's all I have. All right. We have a summary of action items.
Summary of action items include the attorney's going to look into rules surrounding condominiumization.
That's so hard to say.
That's a tough one. We are going to reach out to CDOT again. We have reached out to them to request a specific meeting in Lyons. And the initial response was, our final meeting is in Longmont on this date. And so we wrote back and said, no, we're requesting a special meeting in Lyons. We have not heard back. So we will reach out again. In regard to the artisan manufacturing ordinance, repair some words and straighten up that format a bit. Work with Sergeant Christ and the two or four parties involved regarding mediation of the noise complaints at Lion's Den. Gear up an ordinance to memorialize the policy regarding sprinkler taps on Apple Valley, as well as schedule a workshop and gear up an ordinance most likely regarding acceptance of Lake McIntosh water. And then most recently, follow up on the shooting range letters to the county and senators.
And I need to follow up with the attorney for Airbnb on lodging tax implementation.
Oh, okay. Any other items I missed?
Yes, if we could find a spot in a
Workshop for
Oh, Save Our St. Vrain. I have it right here, too. I would appreciate your contact, because we've reached out several times and have never gotten a response.
And I will forward that to you.
That'd be great. They have a site and a place to leave a message, and then we didn't hear from Amanda for a couple times, so then we reached out to the gentleman, like the co-chair,
I can't remember his name right now.
and we haven't gotten any responses. So Cargill, I think was his last name.
Yeah.
And he'll
So-
call me back if I get a hold of him.
But, so we're happy to schedule that. We just need to get contact. And then a couple, in regard to follow-up to trustee Roberts' comments about lack of using, hesitancy to use a revolving loan fund, the next Chamber of Commerce social, they always do an education session before the social. We are booked to do financing options that are available to businesses. So we'll be covering the revolving loan fund, the USDA loan fund, and Urban Renewal Authority funding at that session. So we are going to address that. The hotel feasibility, we broke down the request for proposal into 4 components. They'll be individually bid. So if we don't have enough money to do all of it, we can choose which sections we want. And then if there's a developer who wants specific information, then we can say to them, to get that information, you'll need to contribute this additional amount. And we did reach out to more than just Mr. Tamburello. We also reached out to Mr. Ferguson and to Mr. Whip, who have both expressed an interest in hotels as well. So we did involve everyone in that. And then last but not least, we received Tiffany Martindale's resignation this morning. So we will be looking for a new Main Street manager. She is going to stay on with us on one contract specifically that she has started with, but she has a separate business. She's a structural engineer and is ready to get back to work, I guess, in that capacity. So we will be looking for another Main Street manager.
Do we need a structural engineer?
We do need that. Yes, but I don't know her licensing capacity right now, but she apparently has been working that on the side and is ready to take that back on full-time.
All right. Okay, is there a motion to go into executive session, please?
I move to go into executive session. Executive session being conducted pursuant to CRS Section 246402-4B for the purpose of receiving legal advice from attorneys representing the town regarding the MOA with Lyons Properties and the town's legal complaint against Lyons Properties in Boulder County Court. I further move to
You can just adjourn.
adjourn
here.
the board meeting at the conclusion of the executive session.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? We'll call for the vote. And just for the record, trustee Miller is recusing and abstaining from this vote. So that passes 6-0. Thank you. All right, so as soon as we're ready,